boy woke up alone in the middle of a snowy mountain slope. He was shaking from the cold. He was wearing only a school uniform, and the icy wind was mercilessly hitting his cheeks. A storm was howling around him, covering everything with a white blanket, and only the roar of the wind broke the silence. Not understanding where he was or how he got there, the schoolboy slowly rose to his feet. Right in front of him, through the veil of the snowstorm, a gigantic beast appeared, reminiscent of an ancient lizard. The monster's body was covered in scaly plates, and two sharp horns protruded from its head like spears. The creature was breathing heavily, steam billowing from its mouth. It did not move, as if assessing the stranger in a school uniform who had accidentally appeared on its territory. The great beast bowed its head, and its voice, rough and heavy, rang out over the howling snowstorm. It announced that it posed no threat, and was on the boy's side. The words were surprisingly calm for such a fearsome creature, and in that strange silence fear gave way for a moment to confusion. Unable to contain his shock, he screamed, demanding an explanation. He wanted to know what this monster, speaking in an understandable language, was going to do to him. His voice broke into a scream, loud, sincere, almost desperate. Before him stood a dragon whose presence was impossible to comprehend, and every moment next to him seemed to violate all the laws of reality. The wind continued to blow the snow down the deserted slope, and whiteness obscured the horizon. But soon shapes began to appear in the fog, strange, elongated, with projections and hovering sections. They were ships moving through the storm. Some slid along the ground, leaving deep furrows in the snow. Others hovered in the air, slowly approaching. Their shape and origin were as mysterious as the boy's appearance here. The dragon, without taking his eyes off the boy, calmly said that his name and intentions were of no importance. His voice was even, without threat, but with that cold calm that felt strong. It was as if he knew that explanations would not change anything now. The boy stood in the snow, surrounded by a storm and approaching ships, not understanding in what game he was a pawn. He tilted his head slightly towards the approaching ships and said that all this was losing its meaning because the people they had seen in the distance were heading here with one goal: to kill them. His voice remained calm, almost indifferent, as if he had seen this more than once. There was no panic in his movements, only the heavy confidence of someone who knows that a fight will soon begin. Accustomed to the daily routine of school life, he could hardly comprehend what was happening. The idea that someone was seriously planning to kill them seemed insane to him. He stood in the snowy chaos, surrounded by a monster and an approaching threat, and did not understand how the world of grades and bells had suddenly changed to war and death. Bewilderment paralyzed him more than the cold. He tried to understand why the unknown was trying to destroy them, and what all this had to do with him. There were too many questions, and no answers. But the time for conversation was rapidly melting away. The approaching threat left no room for explanations, only for action. Everything around them was accelerating, as if space itself was rushing them to make a choice. The dragon noted that the humans seemed to have learned nothing. They were enemies, and they were going to kill again. These conflicts were nothing new. The enmity between the two sides had existed for a long time and was only repeated in new forms. Nothing had changed. As before, so now they remained enemies, driven by fear, pride, and hatred. Through the snowy shroud, the shadows of thousands of figures and machines loomed, moving inexorably towards them. Everything pointed to this being their destination. The dragon and the schoolboy stood in the snowstorm, surrounded by the cold and the approach of the inevitable. There was little time left. The attack was near, and the choice had to be made now. He said that for now he would confront people in his own way. Without waiting for an answer, he spread his massive wings and took off, leaving a whirlwind of snow behind him. His body seemed monstrously huge, his silhouette predatory and menacing. He soared into the sky with frightening ease, heading straight for the oncoming forces, as if preparing to meet them alone. Before taking off, the dragon said that this was their habit: to fight, to destroy, to continue the age-old feud. It had been like this for hundreds of years, and it would continue again. These words sounded like a conclusion, indifferent and heavy. Then he soared into the air, disappearing into the snowstorm, leaving the young man alone to face the impending war. The dragon took off alone, without turning around. He left the schoolboy where he stood, in the snow, under the whistling wind and the roar of the approaching army. His silhouette disappeared into the sky, leaving behind only a whirlwind and the weight of his words. The young man was left alone, surrounded by cold, silence and uncertainty about what to do next. He stood there, frozen, realizing he was alone in the face of an advancing army. The thought that he might have to kill thousands just to survive weighed heavily on him. The situation seemed hopeless. It was either him or them. There was a silent tension in the air, and the snow that continued to fall from the sky only added to the sense of doom. The story begins in an ordinary school. One of the corridors led to a door with a sign that said, Shogi Club. Behind it was a quiet room, intended for board games and rare visitors. Everything was calm and ordinary, without a hint of strangeness or danger. Just silence, school, and an empty game room. Inside, several students sat intently playing at a low table. Black and white stones were arranged on the board. A game of Go was in progress. One of the players suddenly made a move, breaking the silence with a phrase that rang out with cold certainty. The opponent was in check. The room remained silent, only the tense game continued its silent flow. The student who had made the decisive move crossed his arms. With slight irritation, he said that this was the third time his opponent had lost. His voice was calm, but there was a hidden mockery in it. Tension reigned at the board, as if the outcome of the game mattered far more than just the game. The second player spoke quietly, as if making excuses. Wasn't that a good move? His voice sounded reserved, almost hopeful. And although the idea was indeed good, the first student, without changing his pose, replied that even with this approach, defeat was inevitable in another 13 moves. The words sounded confident, almost cruel, as if the outcome of the game had been decided long before the last stone. The game continued. Both players sat at a low table, watching the board intently. The moves became more careful, the movements quieter. There was a slight tension in the air, as if any mistake could cost the entire game. The stones fell on the board one after another, and neither of the opponents was going to give in. The second player, not wanting to end the match with a defeat, suggested playing another game. Addressing his opponent by name, he called him Hoshi. Thus it became clear that the first player, confidently leading the game, was a student named Hoshi, a calm, calculating, and strong opponent. Hoshi glanced at his watch and raised his eyebrows in mild surprise. He didn't immediately realize how quickly time had flown by. It was already late, and he couldn't stay any longer. Rising from the table, he said briefly that he had to go. Business couldn't wait. There was a rush in his movements, as if he had suddenly remembered something important and couldn't afford another minute of delay. Before leaving, Hoshi turned around and said that the second player could approach Reika, the girl sitting behind them, quietly reading, not taking part in the game. There was confidence in his voice. She, according to him, would definitely not refuse. Reika did not look up from her book, not reacting in any way, as if she had already become accustomed to such offers. Reika, a schoolgirl like them, sat with a book in her hands, neat, calm, with a clear gaze. Her attention was absorbed in the pages, but she heard everything. The second player, not paying much attention to her, told Hoshi that his strategy was actually unbeatable. There was a mixture of humor and sincerity in his voice. He added that Hoshi's style was so unusual that even losing to him was, in a sense, pleasant. He didn't answer, he just nodded briefly, turning to leave. He left the club room with light steps, and soon his silhouette disappeared behind the door. The second player remained at the table, and the room again sank into its usual silence. Only the soft rustle of pages reminded that someone was still here. Reiko looked at her opponent with slight shyness. At that moment, he was not looking in her direction. Thus began the story of a schoolboy named Miyako Hoshi. Miyako Hoshi was born into a poor family, and studying at a private school was difficult. To cover expenses, he worked after school. That day, after looking at his watch, he jumped up and ran out of the club. He ran out of breath, clutching the straps of his backpack. He was late again. The school had a system of exemption from tuition fees for high scores, but this path was closed to him. He knew geometry perfectly well. He scored 100, but in English, 54 for the written part, and 52 for the oral part. This was too little. The chance to study for free was unavailable. When he reached the intersection, the light turned red. Miyako paused for only a moment, breathing heavily. There was very little time left. Every second mattered. He glanced anxiously at the road, as if calculating the risk, and stood there, ready to take off as soon as the light turned green. He stood on the edge of the sidewalk, staring at the traffic light. Time seemed to stand still. The seconds dragged on endlessly, as if fate itself had decided to test his patience. At such moments he thought, ironically, that very feeling arises. Here it is, the luck of life. When you are late, even the traffic light seems to become an enemy. He stood there, staring intently at the traffic light. The red light didn't change, as if it was deliberately delayed, mocking the rush. Time passed, but the green light didn't come on, and Miyako's time was rapidly running out. Everything dragged on endlessly until finally, as if in response to his silent plea, the long-awaited green light flashed. Quiet, ordinary, but at that moment almost saving. As soon as the green light flashed on the traffic light, not even a minute had passed. Miyako immediately rushed forward. He crossed the road hurriedly, almost running, as if this light could disappear at any second. Everything seemed unfairly fast, abrupt, as if the whole world had conspired to be late along with him. He ran out onto the crosswalk while the light was still green. His steps were fast, almost running. And suddenly, from around the corner, with the whistle of tires, a car flew out at full speed straight at him. It appeared too abruptly, as if ignoring the rules and reality itself. He narrowly avoided an accident. The car passed him by a few centimeters, and Miyako, without slowing down, ran to the other side. Soon he reached work, an ordinary supermarket. He ran inside, still out of breath. But, taking a step towards the checkout, he suddenly froze. A stranger in dark clothes was standing at the counter, and in his hand he had something resembling a weapon. Without thinking, Miyako ducked and hid behind the counter with goods. The robber, hearing the sound of the door, turned around sharply and squinted. He looked towards the entrance but saw no one. Miyako had already managed to hide behind the rack. The employee at the cash register, noticing this, looked away for a moment, but quickly returned to what was happening. The robber again headed towards her, raising his voice and waving his hand. The tension in the hall became more and more noticeable. The air seemed to thicken. Miyako realized that he needed time, at least a few minutes, to call the police. He hoped that Tsuji-senpai, the senior employee, would understand the situation and stall for time. He knew that a lot was at stake now, and every second was worth its weight in gold. The robber went berserk. His voice rose to a scream. He couldn't stand the look of the employee, as if he considered her silence a mockery. In a rage, he pointed the gun at her face, abruptly closing the distance. One more word and he would finish her off, he hissed. A heavy silence hung in the hall, and even the air became thicker, as if holding its breath. There was no time to wait for the police. Everything was happening too fast. Miyako, watching from cover, realized that the robber was really ready to pull the trigger. Without thinking, he jumped up from his seat and rushed forward, straight to the gunman. His body moved faster than his thoughts. He knew only one thing. He had to save the employee before it was too late. Confused and afraid, before he could process what was happening, the robber turned around abruptly. Panic flashed in his eyes. It all happened in a split second. And, as if on instinct, he pulled the trigger. A muffled shot cut through the silence. Miyako, before he could stop, jerked forward. The bullet hit him straight. His body fell to the cold tiles, as if struck by lightning. Miyako, rushing to protect the employee, found himself in the line of fire. The bullet grazed him, not fatally, but enough to send him to the floor, knocked off his feet. Pain shot through his body, and his clothes quickly became soaked in blood. He was wounded, but alive. Everything around him seemed to go silent. Only the pounding of his heart and the roaring in his ears echoed in the space. The pain spread through his body like poison, heavy and merciless. The cold crept beneath his skin, as if everything around him refused to be alive. The floor beneath him felt like stone ice, and the world seemed dim and distant. Each second lasted an eternity, and all Miyako felt was a growing emptiness, pain, and a shuddering darkness that slowly eclipsed the light. Time dragged on unbearably slowly. The cold penetrated his bones, The pain burned from within, and his body refused to obey. It seemed that even the surrounding sounds repeated the same thing: how cold it was, how painful it was. The noise became a dull roar, and in this piercing silence, Miyako slowly threw his head back, as if surrendering to the will of the darkness. He lay there, gritting his teeth in pain, but inside there was only one wish: for it all to stop. He wanted the cold to go away, the pain to subside, for time to simply stop. He dreamed of relief even for a moment. His whole body groaned, and his consciousness clung to one last thought: let it all end for me, even for a little while. And suddenly, everything disappeared. The pain, the cold, the noise, everything dissolved. When he opened his eyes, a snow-covered plain stretched out before him, white and silent. The wind howled, raising sparkling whirlwinds, and next to him, heavily stepping through the snow, walked a huge dragon, majestic, predatory, with a pair of mighty horns on its head. The schoolboy rose slowly, unsteadily. His gaze slid over the snow-white landscape. The thought struck him suddenly. He had been shot. So he was dead? This was the afterlife? He looked around. Everything around was covered in snow, the wind was howling, and the huge dragon was still striding nearby. The scene seemed unreal, cold, silent, and alien. All around were endless icy expanses. Hanging icicles decorated the rocks, and the wind howled through the frozen gorges. Everything shone with a cold light, but the schoolboy himself did not feel the slightest bit of cold. Before him towered a dragon, gigantic, powerful, with a predatory gaze. He stood in a daze, stunned by the grandeur of the creature and the unreality of what was happening. The boy stood confused in the middle of the snowy wasteland. A giant dragon with an icy gaze towered before him. He didn't know what to do: run away or stay put. His feet seemed to have grown to the ground, and his mind didn't have time to comprehend what he saw. Everything seemed strange, alien, as if torn from someone else's dream. Suddenly the dragon bowed its head and spoke in a low but clear voice. It told him not to worry, because he was on its side. His speech sounded calm, almost soothing, as if the icy wind had suddenly become soft. Okay, he was finally convinced that this was indeed the afterlife. After all, how else could one explain a talking dragon? However, the dragon itself seemed not to understand what was being discussed. It did not know what the afterlife meant, or why it was asking such questions. The dragon, with two curved horns and spiky, hedgehog-like skin, looked coldly at the young man. Then he said that he had suddenly appeared on his territory and was talking nonsense about things he himself did not understand. The creature's voice was hoarse and weighty, like a stone rolling on the ground. Now it became clear. He found himself in the territory of the dragon himself, the ancient ruler of the icy heights. This land, saturated with cold and magic, had belonged to the clan of winged guardians since time immemorial, and now the young lord of demons found himself in the very heart of their domain. Only now did the high school student realize that he was in the very heart of someone else's domain, among snow-capped mountains and forests hidden under a thick veil of ice. This was not just a territory, but a kingdom ruled by a talking dragon with skin covered in spikes. This place was a singularity point, the source of a special force called the Dragon Vein. From the icy heart of the mountains, primordial energy flowed here, feeding the entire region. The dragon lived on this land for a reason. He was its guardian, a link between the flows of power and the balance of the world. Thus it became clear that this place was not the afterlife, as it had first seemed. The dragon guarded a sacred mountain, in the depths of which a singularity point was hidden. A violation of the balance in this place could lead to a catastrophe, the end of the earth itself. This was a place of power, and its protection was entrusted to an ancient guardian. With proper control of this energy, it was possible not only to avoid destruction, but also to bestow blessings upon the lands, abundant harvests, healing, and prosperity. It was one of the rare miracles available to those who understood the essence of the Dragon Vein. Without taking his eyes off the boy, he said that he wanted to know who he was and why he was in his lands. To this the boy answered calmly, albeit with inner turmoil, that he was an ordinary high school student, at least until his death. This is how he introduced himself to the dragon, the guardian of this snowy, sacred mountain. V listened attentively to his words, but did not seem to understand what Senior meant. He bowed his head and said that he did not know how a dead person could continue to speak. The boy, looking at the snowy peaks, could not understand why he was still standing. He asked if this was really the afterlife, since he had definitely been shot. However, the dragon frowned and said that he knew nothing about the world of the dead and did not understand what he was talking about. He placed a clawed paw on the spiky cheek and thought for a moment. He asked the boy if he remembered where he lived before he died and who he was in the previous world. He replied that he was from Japan and died in the store where he worked after school. Despite what had happened, he still remembered his name, age, family, and was sure that he was a human being. Not a dog, not a cat, not something else. They sat opposite each other, and the snowy wind quietly walked across the snowy plain. The dragon, looking at the high school student, was silent. After everything he had heard, he seemed to have gone into thought, slightly squinting as he watched the one who called himself a man from another world. He looked to the side and said that perhaps this boy had died and was reborn here, retaining his memory. The schoolboy did not understand his words. Then the dragon said that if he died and was now alive, then he was the future demon lord. The schoolboy did not understand what nonsense the dragon was saying. He claimed that he was the future demon lord, but wasn't he human? The dragon insisted that he looked more like a spirit king, capable of controlling magic and nature. All this sounded strange and incomprehensible to the schoolboy, who was left confused. It began with an explanation. A demon lord is someone who can control magical power and nature itself. Life on Earth thrives thanks to the dragon vein, a source of energy that feeds the entire world. Magic from this vein spreads across the land, penetrates the air, saturates rivers and forests, maintaining the balance of all living things. And the demon lord is the only one who can directly use the magical power of the dragon vein. He can direct the flow of this energy, enhance growth, heal, destroy, or build entire lands. That is why the fate of the entire world depends on the choice of the Lord. If he is wise, the land will prosper. If he is cruel, everything can plunge into chaos. To connect with the magical power of the dragon vein, the demon lord creates a magical core, a source that concentrates the energy. He then builds a special labyrinth, hidden deep in the earth, or protected by illusions, so that no one can find it and plunder it. This core can be strengthened over time by using rare magical materials. The more powerful the core becomes, the more power the demon lord can draw from it. 3 months before the invasion, the leaders of all the knightly orders gathered in the council chamber. Each had come in person. The event was obviously important. The atmosphere seemed tense, as if there was a premonition of trouble in the air. It was not just a meeting, but rather a council before the storm. Everyone understood. Argyll's greatness was based on the magic that flowed from the dragon veins. It was this that allowed the kingdom to become a mighty knightly power. But over the past 10 years, the flow of power had dried up. The magic no longer flowed as before. To save the country from decline, they needed to find and capture a new dragon vein. Otherwise, Argyll would face inevitable collapse. The chief of staff of the military directorate was Leor Jayford. He was responsible for the strategic planning of the operation. This time, Leor prepared 27 different tactical schemes and calculated more than 150 possible scenarios. Everything was calculated down to the smallest detail, from the enemy numbers to the terrain. He continued to work, cutting out unreliable scenarios and refining the details of the future invasion. Some of the participants were amazed. Out of 150 possible scenarios, Leor selected 7 ideal ones. These plans took into account all the risks, and their implementation could lead to a flawless victory. The other commanders looked at each other, amazed by the scale of the preparation, and one of them cautiously asked, would the chief of staff reveal the details of the chosen strategy right now? The Royal Order of the Kingdom of Argyll consists of 5 corps. The first corps is an elite force of 50,000 fighters, specializing in ground battles. They are distinguished by their special cavalry, They fight riding dragoons, a rare type of dragon. The corps is led by Sigil Hydora, a recognized commander and one of the strongest knights in the kingdom. The second corps of the Royal Order is responsible for the internal security of the kingdom. Its fighters move mainly on horseback, ensuring order in peacetime and stability of the rear in battle. The corps is led by Orestes Zaraik. The third corps consists of battle mages fighting on dragoons. They specialize in long-range attacks, supporting the front from afar. They are commanded by Reyna Kurgis, one of the most powerful sorceresses of Argyll. The Order's fourth corps attacks from the air, using wyverns and fire magic. It is led by Armin Nikin, a master of aerial strategy. The fifth corps is the kingdom's elite. Only 10 knights, natural-born dragon riders. They can directly use the power of dragon veins, which makes them almost legendary. They are led by Fred Kerbin, a hero of many victories, whose loyalty to the crown is unquestionable. Each of their advances was thwarted by the premature strike of the Wicker Storm. This enemy had the ability to sense the approach of troops and even determine the number of soldiers. Any attempt to catch it by surprise failed. It was always one step ahead. Therefore, Argyll's army could not break through to the mountain where the vein of the dragon began. Some were amazed. How could the enemy determine their numbers so accurately? They were told that the Ice Dragon King possessed a rare gift. He was able to sense with astonishing accuracy not only the distance to the invading armies, but also their numbers. This natural instinct made any surprise attack almost impossible. It was he who stood in the way of the dragon vein. What to do against such an ability remained unknown. However, the command was already looking for a way to turn the Ice Dragon King's power to their advantage. Perhaps, if they understood the nature of his gift, they could use his perception against him. A tense silence hung in the War Council chamber. The plan was risky, but there was no other way. The Knights of the First Corps were to move to the vanguard, taking the first blow. Behind them, out of the reach of the dragon's ability, was the Third Corps. Their task was support, to create an ice barrier capable of protecting the vanguard from attacks. The tactical plan was based on precise coordination and precise timing. The slightest mistake could result in defeat. By analyzing past battles, they determined the radius and strength of the ice storm. The dragon never attacked immediately. It waited, trying to cover as many opponents as possible. This gave Argyll's army a chance to develop a strategy to anticipate the moment of attack and disperse the troops, avoiding mass losses. When about 90% of the army enters the kill zone, the dragon will release an ice storm. At this moment, the Knights of the First Corps will activate magical artifacts to withstand the blow. The Third and Fifth Corps will support them from the rear, using the most powerful fire magic to hold back the onslaught and prevent the enemy from developing an attack. The invasion is expected to take place in a vacuum, allowing fire magic to neutralize up to 85% of the ice storm's power. The Ice King, expecting to end the battle with one blow, will expend all of his accumulated energy at once. This risk is explained by his overconfidence, which is planned to be used as the enemy's main strategic miscalculation. The Ice King will need time to recuperate the energy he has expended. This is when the Fourth and Fifth Corps will enter the fray, raining down blows from the air and ground. If they can neutralize the effects of the ice storm, victory is almost within their grasp. This window will be decisive, the main stake of the entire operation. This strategy was the result of bitter experience and many sacrifices. Years of war, loss, and observation formed its basis. The fallen knights passed on their knowledge through reports, chronicles, and instructions. All this allowed them to build an impeccable tactic, one of the few that can withstand the ice storm and the dragon itself. The dragon realized that the enemy had used too much fire. He urgently needed to restore his energy. At the same time, a high school student stood nearby, realizing that he was a demon lord, but was still unable to attack. The dragon looked at him and said that he would soon teach him defense, because the powers that were dormant in him were just beginning to awaken. In order to activate magic, a demon lord must bend it to his will. Magic is based on 16 attributes, the roots of which are the 4 primary elements: fire, water, earth, and wind. It is through them that the other facets of power are revealed, from lightning to illusions, from light to darkness. With these foundations, he he will be able to control the nature of reality itself. Then come the secondary attributes: explosion, ice, wood, and storm, born from the union of the primary elements. The ice attribute is born from water and wind. It was from this nature and behavior of magic that it became clear the dragon possessed the ice attribute. His breath froze the earth, and his presence carried a piercing cold, sure signs of the element of ice. By dividing and transcending the boundaries of the basic elements, a demon lord can awaken the highest attribute. That is why the next step was to discover what element this young man possessed. He was no longer just a boy. He was a demon lord, and his magical essence had to be revealed. The dragon watched carefully, trying to catch hints about the nature of the power hidden within him. The young man's attribute turned out to be void, a rare and mysterious element accessible only to young demon lords. This element did not belong to any of the known elements, but included darkness, space, and distortion. Void absorbed the power of others, broke the laws of nature, and opened the way to unimaginable magic. The dragon fell silent. He knew that people like him appeared only once in a millennium. Speaking of attributes, it should be noted that each of them determines the style of magic, the type of cores created, and even the creatures generated. However, the young demon lord with the void attribute could only use one technique so far: the void barrier. This shield was different from others. For example, the fire barrier could not withstand the blows of earth magic, and holy and cursed shields did not protect against their own kind. The void barrier, on the contrary, absorbed hostile magic regardless of its nature. However, the void barrier had an exceptional property. It reflected the magic of any attribute without being destroyed or suppressed. This unique quality was inherent only to the demon lords. Magic power was life energy, subject to will. It was only necessary to concentrate, and it could be directed into any form: defense, attack, or creation. Everything depended on the intention and inner determination of the magician. Perhaps the former schoolboy did not manage to create a barrier right away. Although his attribute was void, one of the rarest and most powerful, he did not yet know how to control magical power. Without proper concentration and inner harmony, the energy dissipated, not taking the desired form. The dragon explained that even a demon lord must learn step by step, otherwise the power will turn against him. All that was needed was faith in oneself. Not to think, to concentrate. Always remember that magic is a part of oneself. That is all that a budding demon lord should know, not to call for power from outside, but to awaken what is already flowing within oneself. It must be directed by will, by desire to give it form. And then, obeying every word of the dragon, the beginner closed his eyes and concentrated. The air around him trembled. A silent will stirred within him and enveloped his body in a flash. A translucent dome slowly appeared before him, a barrier of emptiness. The dragon watched silently, then nodded. It seemed he had succeeded. Having grasped the basics, the student felt the magic respond to his will, but there was no time left. Flashes of light flared in the sky, heralding the beginning of the attack. The enemies were approaching. The dragon soared into the air, spreading its wings. The dragon said that he would take on the main opponents, and the demon lord would have to deal with the rest himself. The boy clenched his fists. It was time to act. In the sky, soldiers on dragules were already waiting for the Dragon King. They surrounded him from all sides. The young man stepped forward, following the dragon. Enemies on wyverns were already circling the sky, ready to attack. He raised his hand, concentrating. The first wave of fiery arrows fell. He took off, relying on the power of magic, and headed straight for the enemy's air force. It was time to engage in battle. The dragon was hit by streams of fiery magic from 4 directions. Flaming arrows, fiery spears, and scorching whirlwinds tried to break through his icy defenses. The flames reflected off his scales, but he spread his wings with a roar and created an ice dome around himself, extinguishing the flames. Despite the heat, he did not retreat, throwing himself at his enemies with unrelenting fury. The leader activated his thunderfangs. The sky shook with a roaring flash, and a sound wave flew out in all directions, shaking the clouds and drowning out any screams. At the very moment when the thunderblade struck towards the guardian of the vein, cutting through the air with a sparkling arc, the young demon lord recreated a void barrier. Magical pulsations spread out before him, forming a protective wall of emptiness, ready to take on the fury of the attack. A pulsating curtain of emptiness stood between the vain guardian and the blow, flashing with silver light. A blinding discharge split the sky, but crumbled against the magical barrier. The gleam of the blade reflected in the eyes of the dragon guardian. Another second, and everything could have ended differently. A pulsating curtain of emptiness stood between the vain guardian and the blow, flashing with silver light. The witnesses to the scene, hidden behind ice cliffs and air platforms, were dumbfounded. A moment ago, death had seemed inevitable, but now before them stood a young mage, who had summoned a barrier with his will. Their eyes darted between him and the vain guardian, unable to understand how a mortal could stop a blow that could rip apart the sky. The barrier the Demon Lord had created was so flawless that the air around him froze in amazement. Even the vain guardian, a giant of icy silence, froze for a moment, staring at the youth. His scales trembled slightly, as if acknowledging a power equal to the ancient magic of the world itself. The blow aimed at the vain guardian caused the void shield to flare up, a smooth, colorless dome that deflected the energy with frightening precision. The stream of power that should have pierced the dragon turned and struck the troops from which it had emanated. The knights began to scurry. Master Lior, known for his coolness, only frowned, unable to understand how the young man had created such a perfect barrier. The magic meter howled with an alarming light. The needle trembled and froze in the area marked with the void sign. The barrier created by the young V Lord was made of this attribute. It not only protected the vain guardian, but also repelled the attack with devastating accuracy. The Vanekeeper's colossal body was surrounded by signs of destruction. The ground had cracked, the air was filled with ash, and the squad of soldiers who had attacked him had vanished under the weight of their own power. Their magic, reflected by the barrier of the void, had spared none of them. The army mages and strategists watching from the distant hills quickly realized that there was no ordinary ally operating near the Ice King on the sacred mountain peak. The echoes of the void barrier, that pure and ancient magic, left no doubt this was the real Demon Lord, not an imposter, not a spirit, not an illusion. The true bearer of the forbidden power had entered the battle. None of the commanders could explain how a being with the power of the void appeared next to the Ice King. It resembled a legendary Demon Lord who was only mentioned in ancient chronicles. Due to this unexpected occurrence, the council quickly switched to the backup plan, F. Under the order of Master Leor, all squads immediately began to carry out the new orders. Without wasting a second, 3 fighters from the 5th Order, part of the ground forces, were ordered to concentrate all their power on the young Demon Lord. According to headquarters, he had just awakened and had not yet fully mastered his powers. Since the Tanjo was not in position, it was up to them to isolate and, if necessary, neutralize the target. Command has officially approved the use of special weapons, high-class artifacts designed to suppress magical creatures. The goal, to defeat the King of the Unified Dragons. It is noted that the use of such means is justified due to the strategic level threat. All actions must be carried out strictly according to protocol. The officers knew that now was their only chance. The Demon Lord had just awakened, his powers were unstable, his defenses were weak. Hesitation meant defeat. This was the moment they had to strike, quickly, accurately, without mercy. They couldn't afford to miss this opportunity. As announced, the clan will now have to fight the Demon Lord. He is recognized as their enemy. Retreat is out of the question. They have only one direction left: forward, into battle, to victory or death. All units regrouped their battle formation, building a new formation for an air attack. The newborn Void Lord stood next to the mountain peak's guardian, still unaware of what was happening and as if waiting for an unknown sign. Next time, things definitely won't be easy for them. The Lord of the Void has already begun to understand who he is. The barrier that had just been created turned out to be the shield of the newborn Demon Lord. Fortunately, the Mountain King could now only focus on restoring his energy. The lower-ranked dragons fought alongside him, drawing power from the burning veins and directing it at the enemy. It was still unclear whether the Mountain King could withstand the onslaught of 20 airships and 3 dragons at once. Even with the support of his lower kin and the Demon Lord's barrier, the outcome of the battle was still hanging in the balance. This time, the human forces were more numerous and dangerous. Victory would have been easier if the Demon Lord could have destroyed them in one blow, but even he knew that he was still far from full strength, and it was too early to engage in battle. It was clear. The Ice Guardian would deal with the aerial threat, while the young Demon Lord would fight the ground forces. He left, knowing that he could barely protect even himself. But there was no other choice. The Ice Dragon's role was to repel attacks from the air. They had already taken to the skies to deal with the flying ships and riders. The name sounded like a thunderclap across the blazing front. The Guardian of Crystal Peak, the Ice Dragon King, rose above the slopes, proclaiming, "Remember it. This name will become the mark of your defeat." The magical whirlwind raised by his swing enveloped the sky in icy light. The ranks of soldiers remained tight, and not a single one wavered. The confidence in their eyes shone brighter than steel. They were convinced that they would not fall here, but he, the one they called the Lord, would fall. Angelica Gear is the 7th-ranked member of the 5th Order. Her combat prowess and dedication to her orders have allowed her to remain among the best despite her young age. Julia Alcoglius, Knight number 2 in the 5th Order. Known as one of the strongest swordswomen, possessing an attack speed that not every mage can cast a spell with. Henry Moratorio is the 5th-ranking member of the 5th Order. His cold judgment and talent for strategic thinking make him indispensable in tactical maneuvers. Without hesitation, all three charged forward. Angelica swung her blade, summoning a wave of fire. Julia soared into the air on her dragon, cutting off enemies from above, and Henry led the ground force without breaking formation. The sky was filled with flaming blades on all sides as the Knights of the 5th Order, riding on tamed fire dragons, descended upon the defenders of the peak. Angelica Gear led the charge, directing firebolts into icy vortices, followed by Julia Alcoglius cutting through the air with a scarlet spear, and Henry Moratorio keeping close behind, controlling the density of the formation. Their dragons hissed and flashed fire, filling the sky with heat and ominous light. The Ice Dragon King, the Crystal Keeper, thought he could handle these riders. He rose higher into the sky, where he could see the entire battle in the palm of his hand. Their flames were mere flickers before his cold fury. He flicked his tail and flapped his wings, readying himself to strike, confident in his strength and his ancient mastery over fire. Fireballs soared into the sky, forming a thick, fog-like cover. A hot haze hid the fighters, creating a shelter for them. From within this shroud, in clouds of heat and smoke, Lior suddenly stepped out, a commander of the 7th rank, a formidable uniter, whose right hand clutched a curved blade. His steps were confident, and his gaze was directed forward, through the magma of the air, towards the crystal. Crystal had not foreseen this, his eyes narrowing for a moment, his scaly neck tensing. The heat fog had obscured the attack, and Lior's sudden appearance had disrupted his calculations. The Ice Lord rose into the air, wings spreading, but he hesitated, only for a split second. One of the 5th Order's knights broke through the storm of air and struck the crystal's barrier with a spell imbued with a glow of holy light, the same one blessed by the ancient ritual just a few nights earlier. A flash of light pierced the sky, and the dragon's icy shell cracked, releasing a cloud of frost. Some of the knights scoffed, shouting that the Ice King was afraid of men. After all, they said, many of his kind had been slain by this very weapon. The Sword of Chaos, as the ancient chronicles called it, and now it is known as the Dragon Slayer, a blade that has absorbed the fury and blood of many fallen beasts. Surrounded by an incessant roar and clouds of smoke, the Knights of the 5th Order raised their blades, and the Shinmei Triple Storm, an ancient technique combining whirlwind, fire, and lightning, erupted in the sky. The magic came crashing down, tearing through the air, crushing the clouds, as if the heavens themselves were beginning to punish the Ice Ruler. Some thought the dragon was about to fall. The Triple Storm's blows shook the air, and the light from the flashes blinded the sky. People once again believed in victory, their cries merging into a single roar. It seemed that this time the Dragon King would really be defeated. The onslaught of the knights was too powerful. Just before the strike, the young Demon Lord stood before Crystal, the king of the ice dragons, and with a wave of his hand, erected a huge barrier of emptiness, enveloping them both. The enemy's triple storm strike hit the barrier, and a dull ringing sound was heard in the sky. The magic dissipated before reaching its target. The people in the sky were once again stunned. Their carefully planned attack had failed. The void barrier not only repelled the blow, but also dispersed the magical energy. The dragon remained unharmed, and this undermined the confidence of even those who thought victory was a matter of time. Twice in a row, the void barrier completely neutralized their attacks. It did not crack, did not waver. The people realized that all the power of their magic was useless against the power hidden in the Demon Lord. This young man standing in defense of the Ice King turned out to be not an imposter, but the true Demon Lord, the only one who could single-handedly stop the fury of the Sword of Chaos and the magic of the Triple Storm. The knights were getting closer and closer to the Lord, but somehow he did not retreat, but stood there waiting for them. And then the Demon Lord rose above the battlefield, looking back at the retreating air army, and looking towards the enemy knights, said that he wanted to ask them a few questions. He said that in this case, attacking them was a betrayal of reason, because neither he nor the Ice Dragon King had caused any harm to people. While Angelica thoughtfully looked at the Demon Lord, the Fifth Order fighters froze for a moment. Their hearts sank from the unexpectedness of this question. One of them, Julius, could not stand the silence and, looking forward, said that he really wanted to hear their answer? Or do you just want to prove us wrong? The Demon Lord seemed to grasp the essence of these words. He nodded slightly, looking towards the ice giant, and his voice came out calmly but clearly. This dragon life, it is purer, freer, stronger than anything that came before, better than your truth, better than my darkness. Isn't that what strength is? The Demon Lord looked carefully towards the knights and replied, "This place is yours, the kingdom of Argyle, and you think you know best how to control this power. But remember, power itself does not tolerate domination. Its true power is revealed only to those who understand its essence." The Demon Lord's words were not spoken out loud. They were not said, but felt. His gaze, firm and unwavering, reflected the essence of the unspoken words. He saw no enemies before him, only blind invaders who had decided that the world belonged only to them. Humans believed that dragons were predators, and demons were evil, and everything connected to them was subject to destruction. But the Demon Lord himself knew. The vein of a dragon was not a weapon, but the breath of the earth itself, and they simply feared a force they could not control. The Demon Lord nodded, accepting the confession. He was glad that at least this much was obvious to them, his existence and power. This small step was the beginning of a possible understanding between them. The humans believed that they could replace him as the guardian of nature because they thought that control over dragon veins and magic was just a tool of power that could be adopted. They believed that technology and military might would allow them to control nature more effectively, not realizing the depth of the connection between the Demon Lord and the very life of the world. What humans seek is the dragon vein, the source of power known as the atomic surface. They believe that it is because of their superior nature, as the highest species in the world, that they are able to capture and control this power without limit. The Demon Lord began to realize that it was humans the dragon was talking about, humanity, with its ambitions and desire to wield the power of the dragon vein. He realized his naivete and stupidity. Had he ever wanted to remain neutral? Now he understood. Everything had long since become different. The conversation seemed to have come to an end. It was time to continue the fight, to enter the battle again. Now it became clear. He found himself in the territory of the dragon himself, the ancient ruler of the icy heights. This land, saturated with cold and magic, had belonged to the clan of winged guardians since time immemorial, and now the young lord of demons found himself in the very heart of their domain. Now it became clear. He found himself in the territory of the dragon himself, the ancient ruler of the icy heights. This land, saturated with cold and magic, had belonged to the clan of winged guardians since time immemorial, and now the young lord of demons found himself in the very heart of their domain. Humans demonstrated how skillfully they could extract power from dragon veins. The mechanisms woven into their armor emitted a hot glow, and the magical installations on their airships tore crystallized energy from the depths. All this showed that humanity had learned to subjugate ancient power, not for the sake of peace, but for the sake of power. With that same sort of chaos, one of the knights of the Fifth Order raised the blade above her head and said, "Chaos attribute, Dragon Strike." At that very moment, the sword burst into flames of darkness and a crushing wave rushed straight towards the crystal. This strike, created to exterminate ancient creatures, fell with a fury that could only be generated by the will of a man who defied nature. It seemed that salvation had come once again, thanks to the void barrier. The demon lord, without a moment's hesitation, activated it at the very moment when the dragon strike was about to tear the crystal apart. The black flames of the chaos sword collided with the invisible wall made of pure will, and with a roar they crumbled into sparkling sparks. The void barrier had once again proven its power, absolute protection against any attributes. This time, the impact was much more powerful than before. The miasma that remained in the air did not simply tremble. They flared, cutting through the sky with waves of distorted light. The void barrier coped with the reflection, but its surface cracked, as if the very fabric of reality could not withstand the pressure. The watching army was glad that their attacks were having an effect. 3 deadly strikes filled with the poison of ancient dragons were aimed at the young demon lord with such speed that the air froze in anticipation. The people acted without mercy, seeking to eliminate the one they considered the greatest threat as quickly as possible. The poisonous energy in each blast sought to corrode not only the flesh, but also the very essence of the demonic power. It was not just a blow. The element itself, released from the dragon's throats, seemed to be the embodiment of death. The air trembled, the sky turned black with heat, and in the next moment everything disappeared in a blinding flash. If not for the barrier of emptiness created by the demon lord, the Ice Guardian would have been wiped off the face of the earth. The barrier absorbed the blow, trembled, but stood, and only then did it become clear who was truly saving this world from destruction. The void barrier, though it withstood the main onslaught, was not perfect. It saved from destruction, but a tiny crack in its edge allowed some of the force to pass through the defense. When the demon lord turned around, his gaze fell on Crystal, the Ice Dragon King. The mighty beast stood there, trembling with tension, and scarlet spots were spreading across its snow-white scales. Blood was flowing from a deep wound. Apparently, the powerful blow that pierced the air and magic had partially penetrated the defense. The void barrier had withstood much, but it was not flawless, and its imperfections had affected the life of its ally. The fall of the crystal did not go unnoticed. The people immediately seized the moment. The weakened Ice Dragon King could no longer hold back the sky, and now the entire might of the army was focused on another target. The next task, as the new order stated, was to finish off the demon lord while his magic and concentration were weakened. Without delay, the fighters of the Fifth Order began to prepare for the next attack, fast, merciless, and decisive. A signal was received from the team to Master Lior that the time had come. The Third Order, following on the southern flank, was given the order to strike the decisive blow. Their mages and knights were already arrayed in attack formation, each in armor imbued with the spells of destruction. Charging their artifacts and strengthening their shields, they awaited the signal. The fate of the battle depended on their advance, and each of them knew it. The air trembled with tension. The end of the battle was in their hands. Despite his severe injuries and weakened state, Crystal, the Ice Dragon King, did not retreat. His body was still shrouded in the darkness of the poisonous chaos miasma, corroding his scales and burning his bones. However, even in this state, he stood tall, not allowing himself to fall. His breathing was ragged, but his gaze remained clear, determined to defend his territory to the end. Miasma permeated the air, earth, and sky, becoming the invisible core of the battle itself. The humans unleashed their deadliest weapons, empowered by its poisonous power. With every swing of their sword and every spell, they left a trail of destruction in their wake, as if death itself were slithering across the battlefield. And now the moment of the final blow has arrived. Master Lior gave another order to deliver a fiery blow. The combined magic of fire and wind merged into one destructive force. From the depths of the air vortex, the Red Lotus Flame Cannon was born, a spell that contained all the hatred and determination of the Fifth Order. The flaming projectile roared forward, cutting through the air, its heat scorching everything in its path. It was a powerful spell that could bring down even the heavens. According to ancient teachings, the void attribute, the spiritual attribute, the curse attribute, and the holy attribute are considered special, the rarest of all magical schools. They cannot be taught or developed with experience. Their presence is determined solely by innate talent. Owners of such attributes are extremely rare, and each of them is capable of changing the course of the world, being a conductor of forces that go beyond the understanding of ordinary magicians. The holy attribute is associated with healing, purification, and protection. Its power returns lost vital energy and dispels darkness. The curse attribute represents destruction from within. It controls poisons, miasmas, and decaying energy. The spiritual attribute affects the psyche and consciousness, allowing you to influence the fighting spirit, fears, and even the will of the enemy. The emptiness attribute is an ancient force, the patroness of demons, capable of generating darkness, summoning monsters from the abyss, forming demonic dungeons, and subjugating the materiality of non-existence. Above all others towered the four elemental peaks: the life attribute, which grants beings immortality and rebirth; the chaos attribute, an unpredictable element of destruction capable of distorting the laws of the world; the time attribute, which rules over moments, accelerating or slowing down the flow of existence; and the space attribute, which tears apart the boundaries between worlds. It was chaos that was called upon at that moment. 3 of the strongest of the Fifth Order brought their might down on the battlefield, wrapped in black vortices of unstable energy, and struck as if the world itself shook from their onslaught. But even this deadly onslaught, saturated with the power of chaos, was mercilessly repelled. The void barrier created by the Demon Lord, distorting the very essence of magic, absorbed the blows and dispersed them into nothingness. This drove the warriors of the Fifth Order into a frenzy. Seeing how their highest magic is weakened by a single demon, they understood there is no moment to lose. While he is exhausted and defeated, while the ice on the dragon's wings has not yet melted, they must finish him off. Here, now, the third squad received an absolute order. Do not allow the enemy a single moment to recover or strengthen their defenses. No chance for a second contract, no moment of respite. At the signal of the commander, the mages activated a series of volleys from the Red Lotus flame cannon. Bright flames, imbued with the magic of destruction, fell upon the barrier of the void, wave after wave, without stopping, until the flesh of the air cracked under the weight of the fiery onslaught. The attacks continued, with destructive spells raining down from the sky and the ground, shaking everything around them. Blazing whirlwinds, flashes of lightning, and the crackle of cursed spells all mingled into one roar, reflecting the wrath of humanity. The blazing magic circles flared up in the air once more, and another volley of fury was unleashed towards the void barrier. The newborn Demon Lord, despite his youth, created a protective barrier of void that encompassed his power. For such an inexperienced mage, the spell was almost perfect, a thin, barely wavering field that kept the deadly magic at bay. But even with this gift, it was clear that maintaining it was a trial, exhausting the body and soul. The barrier trembled like a breath before a storm, but for now it held. Despite the Void's barrier's resilience, the Fifth Order warriors did not retreat. They began to form a complex magic circle, a multi-level structure of 20 superimposed layers. Each new layer strengthened the previous one, intertwining spells into a deadly web. In the center of the circle, the Red Lotus cannon flared up, its power increased several times, preparing to break through even the most perfect barrier. When the magic circle was completed, the 3 mages activated a deadly spell, enhanced fire and wind magic, the Dragonfire Wind Cannon. The combination of the wind and fire cannon gave birth to not just an attack, but a devastating storm capable of incinerating everything in its path. A whirlwind of flame swirled in the air, with the energy of destruction condensed in the center. It was a blow capable of turning even dragon scales to ashes. This sudden attack, so devastating that the very sky above the battlefield shook, shocked both the Ice Dragon King and the Demon Lord. The Void Barrier, once thought to be impenetrable, could not withstand it, cracking under the onslaught. The attack was such that, even if the Demon Lord repelled it, the next one would come down in an instant. Realizing that further resistance was doomed, the weakened dragon, bloodied and exhausted, firmly ordered his ally to retreat. At that moment, the attack had reached such a power that even through the defense of the Void Barrier, its weight could be felt. The air trembled, the magic circle shone with a blinding light. The wind and fire cannon roared over the field. Even the most skilled of barriers could not guarantee salvation. Every blow now threatened to break through the defense. Both the Demon Lord and the dragon realized that the next one could be the last one. The Demon Lord didn't have time to retreat. Just as the barrier disappeared, just as he took a step away, flames rained down on him from the sky. The Lotus Cannon's fire pierced the air and struck his body with terrifying accuracy. The place where he stood was illuminated by a blinding light, and in the next moment silence engulfed the field. The Demon Lord's silhouette disappeared in the incinerating glow. And yet, the battle was not over. Even though the Demon Lord had fallen under fire, the fight continued among the snow-capped mountains, where swirling snow mixed with ash. The sky was torn apart by flashes of spells, and the cries of dragons drowned out the hum of magic. The humans, driven by the thirst for victory, were not going to stop. Their goal was to completely cleanse the territory, even if it meant destroying every last crystal of ice. After the explosion, which sent columns of black smoke into the sky, everything was plunged into an uneasy silence. Visibility disappeared. The snow wind scattered the ashes, and even the most keen-eyed soldiers could not discern whether anyone had survived at the epicenter of the blow. In the ensuing uncertainty, everyone froze. It was unclear whether the Ice King had survived, and whether the Demon Lord had been finished off, or whether they had stood firm once again. There was no answer. Only swirling fog and indistinct silhouettes in it. When the flames died down and the last flames dissolved into the freezing air, a deep, charred hole gaped in the very spot where Crystal, the Ice Dragon King, and the Demon Lord had stood. The snow around them had melted, the ground had cracked from overheating, and the air trembled with residual heat. No bodies, no traces. Just a silent hole, as if the earth itself could not withstand the force and decided to swallow them both. When the warriors of the Fifth Order saw this gaping hole, their first thoughts were full of triumph. Had they really destroyed the dragon? Was it possible? But the elation quickly gave way to doubt. Even though the body was gone, there was a heavy, oppressive feeling in the air, as if space itself still remembered the presence of a great power. The mages felt it first. A familiar vibration, a pulsation of the void. The Demon Lord was still alive. He had not fallen. After a moment of silence, a new order was given. To finish off the Demon Lord. The humans were told to attack without mercy, using swords, until the barriers were restored. The Fifth Order was instructed to capture the Dragon King at any cost. If he resisted, eliminate him. This order was decisive. It was believed that the dragon should have already expended most of his power, and now they had to be ready for his final, desperate counterattack. The Fifth Order advanced towards the gaping chasm in the ground, confident that they could overcome the two weakened opponents. They stepped carefully, but without fear, for they believed that the battle was almost over. However, the Dragon King, despite his wounds and exhaustion, noticed the approach of the enemy. His clouded gaze cleared, his claws tensed, and his breathing, although ragged, became cold again as he prepared for another fight. It all meant one thing. The end was coming for the Dragon King. His body was wounded, his wings were scorched, and his scales were cracked. But he would not fall alone. Clenching his fangs, the ancient beast raised his head, gathering the last of his magical power. An icy vortex swirled around him, turning into a deadly spear of fury. He prepared for the final counterattack, a blow that would carry his enemies into death with him. As Crystal, the Dragon King, rose heavily into the air through the roar of ash and the cracking of ice, all around him was frozen in an uneasy silence. Whether this was a dying flash of power or the beginning of a new attack, no one knew. Only the shadows of his wounded wings cut through the clouds of smoke, and the very air trembled with tension, foreshadowing that something decisive was about to happen. It turned out that this was not an attempt to escape, but a powerful counterattack. Crystal, the King of Dragons, hung in the air, engulfed in the glow of icy power. Spreading his wings, he took a defensive position, and despite the damage, he was able to withstand the attack. Clouds of cold and sparks froze around him, like a shield, into which the destructive power of the enemy crashed with a roar, and was unable to crush him. As the crystal rose higher, it gathered a vortex of power around itself, glowing cores of cold and fury swirling around its body as if preparing for a great spell. Ice cracked in the air, and the sky groaned under the weight of its magic. At the same moment, the Demon Lord slowly rose from the depths of the hole that had been torn. The barriers lay shattered behind him like a torn web, and yet Amidst the wreckage of power, the demon lord stood, breathing heavily. It was only because of the last layer of protection he had created in desperation that he had survived. Otherwise, his body would have long since turned to dust. Now, exhausted, with only the remnants of his magic, he could barely stand. The emptiness within him wavered like a flame in the wind, and it seemed that one wrong move would completely consume him. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if hoping that the pain would subside on its own, that the battle would end without bloodshed. But no. The enemy's breath still rang in the air. Their footsteps were approaching. Their swords were drawn. Realizing that there was no retreat, the demon lord clenched his fists. He had no choice. To survive, he would have to spill his own blood. As he looked up, the silhouette of Crystal, the Dragon King, emerged through the ash and smoke. He stood in the middle of the ruined valley, scorched, bloodied, but still majestic. His wings trembled with effort, but his gaze remained firm. He had not fallen. Yes, and as the demon lord peered out from the deep hole he had been hiding in, he saw the Fifth Order approaching him. Their steps were firm, their weapons ready to strike. They surrounded him with a cold determination in their eyes, not doubting that they could finish him. Without a moment to breathe, the Fifth Order fighters were closing in. They weren't going to hesitate. The target was right in front of them, and only one thought burned in their hearts, to finish off the demon lord. As the army approached the gaping hole, a strange bubble began to rise from it, distorted by air and light. It shimmered with ominous springs, sometimes crimson, sometimes violet, as if the abyss itself was breathing through it. The warriors froze. Their swords trembled with tension, because something appeared before them that was beyond ordinary understanding. The warriors of the Fifth Order peered into the swirling shroud with tension. They did not understand what they were up against. The strange haze could be miasma, demonic magic, or something else unknown. Whispers passed through the ranks that it could be demons. People began to huddle together in tight groups, covering each other with shields and casting protective spells. After all, if 100 creatures burst out of the pit, one would not be able to withstand it. Several of the Fifth Order's mages quickly cast a spell of image transmission, aiming it at Master Lior. They hoped that he would be able to better understand what was happening in the heart of the hole. At the same time, Lior himself, in a fortified tower, was completing the formation of a new, previously unexplored spell for detecting accumulations of spiritual energy. He already felt as if something ancient was awakening from the depths. It was reported that an unknown energy source had awakened, the nature of which was beyond the ability of even the most experienced mages of the capital to analyze. The master was warned that the miasma detected in the area of the dragon hole might not be the product of demons, but something even more ancient. And, at the very end of the message, it was said something terrifying. In addition to the demon lord, there really were other demons in that hole. Their number, form, and essence remained unknown. Only silhouettes and sensations transmitted through miasma spoke of their presence. People in the orders did not know what to do next. Retreating meant admitting defeat, but going forward meant stepping into the abyss, not knowing what was hidden behind the cover of this hole. Letting them in meant giving the monsters a chance to break out. Master Lior, calm amidst the growing anxiety, gestured for all the necessary equipment for magical analysis to be gathered. He knew that in such circumstances one could not rely on feelings or guesses alone. While the other knights watched the trembling air near the hole, he prepared to determine once and for all the nature of the entity hidden below. To identify was to know what he was about to fight, or what he must hold at all costs. A moment later, the ranks of soldiers wavered. The realization came too late. If the demon catalog had been studied in advance, they would not have had to act blindly. But now there was no choice. The demons, whose presence was felt through the pulsing magic, could be far more dangerous than expected. While Master Lior kept a careful watch, the First Order did not hide its indignation. They, an elite unit, were tasked with dealing with the situation themselves, on direct orders from the Supreme Commander. Their indignation grew into alarm. Something was very wrong. Master Lior gave a new order to surround the area around the perimeter without coming into contact with the unknown substance. He suspected that these round black bubbles were not simple miasma, but perhaps a form of life matter, or a seal holding something inside. Soldiers were positioned in a circle, ready for any surprise. The air trembled with tension, and faint gleams of violet light began to flicker among the bubbles, a sign that something was about to manifest. The First Order commander, impatient and irritated, drew his lightsaber and, despite Master Lior's warnings, slashed through the nearest black bubble. At the same time, a sharp roar erupted from within, the air thickened, and the ground shook beneath his feet. After the sword cut through the bubble, there was no explosion or attack, only silence. The creature seemed to disintegrate into thin air, and the black mist slowly disappeared as if it had never existed. The soldiers breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that the commander had destroyed the dangerous demon. The commander, who was considered the hope of all mankind, stepped forward with determination. The people, watching his actions, took it as a sign of strength. They wanted to prove that nothing, not even the demon lord or unknown bubbles, could stop them. Inspired by his courage, they began to approach the center, demonstrating confidence and readiness for battle. The First Order took up battle positions, placing warriors around the perimeter. They launched a coordinated attack on the black bubbles, firing spells and slashing with swords. However, the commander felt a strange uneasiness. Something elusive lurked behind the silence. Not a single bubble was attacking back, and everything seemed too easy. This sense of apprehension grew when one of the fighters noticed that some of the bubbles had begun to move on their own. The Demon Lord, still hidden in the depths of the gaping hole, continued to produce black bubbles. One by one, they rose to the surface like shadows of his will. He poured the last of his power into them, continuing their birth without ceasing, as if he himself were becoming the core of this soulless source of darkness. Shortly before the Order arrived, retreating deeper into the burrow, the Demon Lord walked weakly forward, feeling his strength fading. The thoughts in his head were tangled, not about salvation, but about the meaning of what was happening. He remembered everything that led him here, and he could not understand. Was this battle his mistake, or still part of the destined path? The current formation was a limited defensive scheme without supporting Link's pawns. It was only good for holding one line of defense, but could not stop the fall of the key figure, the Dragon King. To strengthen the defense, new nodes and closures were needed, but there were almost no resources left. They had reached a critical point. King Bei, the Demon Lord, had never created dungeons or demons before, and now this was his only chance. The Dragon King said that a Demon Lord's abilities would naturally emerge if one focused. Given that there were no other options, the Demon Lord decided to trust his words. He paused, holding his breath, and focused all his attention inward. In the silence, amidst the rubble and smoke, he searched for the power that once belonged only to the ancient Void Lords. And then, in the midst of the swirling darkness, he felt a strange density in his palm, something warm and heavy, like a clot of darkness. It seemed he had managed to create something new. He didn't know what to call it, but he intuitively understood. It could be a magical core. It pulsed, responding to his will, as if waiting for a command. He decided to connect the core to the nearest dragon vein to direct the energy flow into it. Now that the magic power began to recover, the core began to shine brighter. The barrier that surrounded it strengthened, and in the space in front of him, a dungeon map began to appear. A complex, as if woven from pulsating lines, a reflection of the magic core's work. Everything was going according to plan. It turned out that creating a full-fledged dungeon required too much time and concentration. It was a luxury now. The Demon Lord needed, first and foremost, the mass production of minions, the creation of monsters capable of holding back the human advance. He directed the energy of the core not into the map, but into the depths of the vein, causing the growth and awakening of the first shadow creatures. When creating his first minions, the Demon Lord faced many parameters: initial combat experience, rudimentary intelligence, physical characteristics, appearance. Creatures that were too strong required too much energy and time. He chose a middle level, not too weak, not too powerful. One thing was important: to produce them quickly, in large quantities, to at least temporarily hold back the onslaught of the Fifth Order. Among the parameters he adjusted, he paid special attention to special abilities. These skills could be the deciding factor in a fight. He went through the options: poison, regeneration, illusions. explosion on death. He needed not just a strong skill, but one that could give an advantage in a numerical battle. He chose an ability that activated upon contact with the enemy. Chain Erosion, the gradual destruction of enemy armor and magical barriers. The Demon Lord aimed to create minions with outstanding combat experience, capable of adapting and growing. However, the pursuit of unlimited numbers and speed of development required too many resources. His current magic core was not yet capable of supporting such a complex system. Therefore, he decided to limit the complexity, focusing on simple but quickly produced creatures with the potential for future enhancement. If all minions share a special ability, a collective mind, then each new creature will automatically inherit the experience of its predecessors. Shared thinking will allow them to fight in a coordinated manner, as a single unit. Even newborn fighters will instantly acquire the combat skills accumulated by the others. This will ensure a rapid increase in their effectiveness and will allow the formation of an army that develops with each new generation. All this is a collective intelligence that surpasses human thinking. All the First Order fighters in unison destroyed one after another the magical cores, black bubbles created from concentrated energy. They moved slower and slower, and at the first blow they crumbled into dust, which gave people confidence in their victory. The soldiers began to leave the task of destroying the black bubbles to new recruits, those who had never succeeded in anything before. These creatures were so weak that even inexperienced warriors could easily deal with them. However, everyone understood that sooner or later the labyrinth would no longer contain the threat, and then something else, much more dangerous, would appear. The First Order commander sensed a change. The black bubbles began to vibrate faintly. Their shells trembled slightly, as if something were awakening deep within. The movement was not chaotic. On the contrary, it seemed synchronous, as if obeying some internal rhythm. Sharp needles, as if made of compressed darkness, suddenly began to burst out of the black bubbles that had previously seemed harmless. They pierced the air with a crisp whistle, reflecting the dull shine of magic on their edges. While the other soldiers were hurriedly breaking the black cores, one of them, standing slightly to the side, hesitated. He looked more closely. Something seemed to be moving inside the bubble, as if a swirling shadow was trying to break out. The soldier frowned, leaned closer, but before he could react, a flash of dark energy pierced the bubble from within, and his eyes widened in horror. While the soldier was watching the strange movement inside the core, a sharp, spear-like black spike suddenly burst out of it. It pierced the air with terrifying speed and dug right into the soldier's face, hitting his eye. It all happened so quickly that he didn't even have time to scream. He only staggered, clutching his face, from which dark blood was already oozing. The demon's movement improved. From that moment on, they became stronger and stronger. It was unexpected, and something definitely didn't add up. From that moment on, the remaining black bubbles began to burst one after another, releasing deadly fragments. From their cracking shells, huge, shiny needles burst forth, sharp as blades. They pierced the soldiers with terrible precision, tearing apart armor and ripping open bodies. Screams of pain were heard all around. Chaos covered the ranks, and the air was filled with metallic ringing and the smell of blood. The way it all happened was so sudden that none of the soldiers had time to react. The leaders watched in stunned silence as one by one their men fell, pierced by sharp needles of black bubbles. Among them stood the First Order's second in command, Alar Byrne. He stared at the carnage, horrified and confused, unable to comprehend what had just begun. Alar Byrne, having recovered from his stupor, shouted a command to the nearest soldiers to drag the seriously wounded to the safety of the barriers. His voice was sharp and commanding, rousing the others from their shock. He then turned to the signalman and anxiously asked for the commander's location. The situation was becoming increasingly chaotic, and he knew that without leadership, they would not be able to hold the line. At that moment, Alar's gaze caught the figure of the commander standing nearby. He had already drawn his sword and was moving towards the cluster of black, ominously pulsating demon cores. His steps were quick, confident, as if he alone was going to stop the approaching catastrophe. Byrne froze, feeling a mixture of fear and hope rising inside him. The commander was about to engage in battle with something that no one had understood until now. The commander charged forward, his sword flashing in the dark light. He darted between the demon cores, cutting them down before they could fully form. His blade left behind bursts of magical energy and slashed remains, as if he were cutting a path through a raging storm. He knew that if he slowed down even for a moment, these creatures would become far more dangerous. The commander, having chopped up dozens of black cores, was breathing heavily, but did not allow himself to stop. His movements became more and more furious, and his blows more precise. It seemed that he had already exterminated them all. However, with each massacre, the dark energy around him thickened, and the commander realized the demons were not disappearing completely. They were accumulating strength. Each destroyed core made the remaining ones stronger, faster, smarter. The Ice Dragon King rose slowly from the frozen plain, his wings casting glittering shadows across the snow. The humans, though they had noticed his approach, were unable to provide support to Lord Julius, yet their forces were scattered and their strategic position was unstable. They could only watch as the cold threat gathered over the battlefield. As soon as Lior gave the signal, the warriors would immediately retreat, without a moment's delay. At the same time, the commander, standing on the desecrated ground, gripped the hilt of his sword and prepared to take the initiative into his own hands. He understood hesitation would cost the lives of those who remained. The news reached Master Lior. The creatures, previously seemingly harmless, were rapidly gaining strength. He frowned, unable to comprehend the nature of what was happening. His mind was alien to the understanding of such an evolution. Then he gave the order to immediately transmit a magical image from the scene so that he could see everything with his own eyes. The description was as follows. A completely new kind of demon appeared before them. Their nature was frightening. With each new death, they only grew stronger. This was the first time people had encountered something like this. What had previously seemed harmless now turned into a growing threat, growing at the expense of its own death. If this continues, humanity risks being wiped off the face of the earth. Realizing the scale of the threat, the soldiers approached Supreme Commander Lior for permission to retreat. He approved the retreat, feeling the weight of loss. Too many lives had been lost because of him. He then ordered the First Order to retreat to the airship immediately. The fight against the Demon Lord was handed over to the Fifth Order. The order to retreat had already reached the fighters, and now the First Order began to retreat hastily. The soldiers regrouped, supporting each other, and retreated to the designated rally point. Despite the fatigue and losses, each of them understood that the most important thing now was to survive, so that they could pass on everything they had learned to those who would continue the fight. The commander ordered Alair to take charge of organizing the retreat. He immediately took command, distributing soldiers into cover groups and making sure the wounded were carried out first. Everything happened quickly and smoothly. Even in the chaos, Alair kept his cool and carried out his orders precisely. While the First Order fighters began to retreat under Alair's leadership, their commander remained in place. He alone held back the onslaught of black demonic cores, not allowing them to break through the line of retreat. Despite the mortal threat, he continued to fight, giving the rest a chance to escape. His figure stood between the enemy and the people, like the last fortress. When the retreat had already begun, and the soldiers were holding almost at the very exit, the air was suddenly cut by strange, dull sounds. These ominous vibrations echoed through the tunnels. The source was the same, the black cores of the demons. They began to move again, emitting a low hum, as if foreshadowing a new wave of horror. The noise quickly increased, and anxiety again engulfed the ranks of the retreating ones. They were demons. New, aggressive entities burst forth from the black cores. They moved forward rapidly, attacking the people from the front. Alair, without hesitation, stood before them. He was going to hold back the onslaught, buy time to retreat. The soldiers, under his cover, quickened their pace, hurrying towards the airship. The battle became a race against time. Every moment could be decisive. There were too many of them. The darkness of black demons filled the passage. Alair, gathering all her strength and speed, rushed through the ranks of enemies, trying to destroy as many as possible in the shortest time. With each blow, she cut her way through, but suddenly the sky seemed to freeze. The air thickened, and something strange, ominous began to happen right in front of them. In the midst of the battle, when the First Order forces had already begun to retreat, a dull, heart-rending sound was heard in the sky. One of the black demons, having made its way unnoticed through the carnage, rose into the air and fell upon the airship. A powerful explosion thundered in the sky, and in the next few seconds, the airship burst into flames. Before he could even turn towards the camp to understand what had happened, one of the soldiers froze. A moment later, a giant black needle flew out of the shadows and pierced his chest. Before he could scream, his body went limp, and the next moment, the needle was pulled back out, disappearing into the darkness, as if it had dissolved into thin air. And then, through the smoke and panic, the Demon Lord appeared in the sky. He floated slowly above the battlefield, apparently having mastered the art of flight. In his right hand, a strange weapon gleamed, a thin but sinister blade pulsing with black energy. His shadow fell upon the remnants of the retreating army, a harbinger of final destruction. The Demon Lord, floating in the air, noticed a massive explosion erupting not far from him. Flames, mixed with smoke and shards of shattered metal, shot up from the sky. The explosion was so violent that even his shield shook from the shockwave. He narrowed his eyes at the chaos below, realizing that someone still dared to resist. Allaire, who remained on the ground, covered the retreat, while the surviving soldiers from the airship rose into the sky. Their magical knots glowed dimly, barely keeping the transport aloft. The Demon Lord noticed their movement. His gaze lingered on the fleeing ones, and for a moment everything around him seemed to freeze. He silently watched as the last rays of resistance tried to break free from the trap. The Demon Lord raised his sword, which had absorbed darkness and fire, the Abyssal Sword. He paused in midair, then, putting the last of his strength into the blow, hurled the blade downwards. The air above the plane flared with a crimson rift. A wave of destructive energy rushed towards the retreating airship, tearing the sky apart. The vessel vibrated, its shields trembled, and with a dull groan, the hull began to fall apart under the onslaught of the demonic spell. The blow was devastating. The next moment, the airship exploded in midair, blinding the sky with a flash and scattering flaming debris around. A fiery mushroom momentarily obscured the horizon, and only charred shreds of fabric from the sail slowly fell down. Screams were heard, but in the smoke and thunder it was impossible to tell who survived. With a single swing of his sword, the Demon Lord wiped the entire airship from the sky, as if a gigantic empire had collapsed in flames. His strength now seemed immeasurable. Floating above the battlefield, he silently watched the fleeing people. It seemed he no longer had any doubts. His goal was now clear, to exterminate every last one. The airship shot away as fast as they could, cutting across the sky above the snowy valley. The wind tore from the icy peaks, as if trying to stop them, but the machines, their bodies shaking, rushed away from death. Every moment of hesitation could be the last. Too great was the horror left behind. The Demon Lord had no intention of letting the survivors go. Taking to the air, he spread a monstrous barrier around himself, covering the sky and the earth. A sphere of darkness, vibrating with dense magical power, compressed the space, blocking the airship's escape. Even the sky seemed to sink heavily under the weight of this spell. The snow stopped, and a dim light filled the sky, indicating that they were inside the barrier. The Demon Lord's magic had worked flawlessly, a huge dome separating them from the rest of the world, hiding the land under a thin, gray canopy. The warriors looked around, unsure of where the exit was, but the Demon Lord stood calmly in the center, watching their reactions. Deputy Allaire and reported that the Demon Lord's barrier had deployed over the battlefield. The sky was blocked, and the airships could not fly in. Allaire listened to the messenger, rose to his feet, and, without hesitation, ordered preparations for landing. He declared that he intended to defeat the Demon Lord himself and continue the operation despite the magical barrier. Allaire added that he would gather a large number of fighters from the squad with him today. He intended to break through the barrier and engage in battle personally. His voice sounded firm. He was not going to retreat. The soldiers, hearing the order, began to prepare for the descent, checking their equipment and exchanging glances. A fight with the Demon Lord awaited them ahead. Allaire warned that this could be a one-way ticket. He looked at the soldiers and told them to think twice, but no one backed down. 5 volunteered to go with him to destroy the Demon Lord himself. and he ordered the rest to fight off the minions. The team quickly split up, some preparing for the final assault, others for defense. The bottomless demons were created by the hand of the Demon Lord himself. In an instant, as if with a click, they emerged from the darkness. Their forms were distorted, their movements were fast and unnatural. These were not just warriors, but creations that surpassed many miracles of magic. Even those who had seen much could not help but admit, before them were masterpieces of destruction. The white slopes of the sacred mountain flared with a scarlet glow, a reflection of the awakened darkness. All parameters of the demons' powers were distributed according to their growth rates, and experience and knowledge were accumulated through the collective mind. The dark matter from which they were born was the basis of everything, a material capable of taking any form, be it a weapon, a body, or the will of the Creator itself. The countermove was brilliant. When they were cornered, the demons launched an attack with fury. The Demon Lord watched with delight. The carnage he had initially sought to avoid had finally begun. But now his attitude had changed. He no longer hesitated. He was going to survive no matter what, and fight to the end. The Demon Lord raised the sword that had grown into his hand and prepared to strike. There was only one thought in his mind: to leave no one alive. His gaze became cold, his movements precise, and all his strength was focused on the coming strike. He did not hesitate. There would be no mercy. Thus, a powerful explosion erupted inside the barrier. The air shook, the ground cracked, and the light from the flash blinded those who were nearby. The magic, compressed to the limit, burst out, shaking everything inside the dome. This explosion marked the beginning of a real battle, where each side now acted without mercy. Those outside the barrier quickly realized that, if they did not intervene, the entire First Order would perish inside, becoming the dust of this land. The Dragon Flame Cannon could certainly destroy the barrier, but the slightest carelessness and the knights would disappear along with it. Meanwhile, the Dragon King stubbornly burned his life energy, releasing snowstorm after snowstorm. They wondered, would the Ice Dragon not disappear forever? For the first time in 200 years, a true Demon Lord had appeared. No one could have imagined that the First Order would find itself in such a losing position. But soon he would send the Royal Guard into battle, the strongest warriors, the pride of the entire people. It was when they stepped onto the battlefield that the real battle would begin, thought Master Lior, looking towards the drawn-in barrier. The Dragon King could be contained by the magic of the Third Order. If the 3 knights of the Royal Guard joined forces and acted together, the Demon Lord could be destroyed without much difficulty. This scenario seemed realistic. With a coordinated attack and precise calculation, even an ancient evil could fall under the power of the king's will. The sudden appearance of demons in Adiga stunned the people and left them at a loss, but it was not the end. They understood that while the Demon Lord had not yet revealed his full potential, they had a chance. Deciding not to waste time, they were going to strike first, to destroy him before he gained full power and became invincible. The order was given, all from the Fifth Order, to immediately move to the Void Dome of the Horde and Demons. The fighters did not hesitate. Having received the order, they began preparing for the transfer. Their task was to break through to the very heart of chaos and strike at the center of the demon forces. Each of them knew the outcome of the entire battle depended on this mission. They were told that the Demon Lord had created new creatures in his cave. Dozens of demons born from the darkness had already begun to surround the battlefield. These creatures carried fresh power within them, and their approach threatened to upset the fragile balance. The fighters were told to be on guard. The threat was growing with each passing minute. The soldiers of the Fifth Order had no intention of wasting their energy on new demons. They did not deviate from their course. Their goal remained the same. Instead of holding off the cave's spawn, they went straight for the Demon Lord. Their intention was clear: to reach the main enemy and finish him off while there was still a chance. The Third Order, under the command of Lord Rain, was given orders to continue to repel the Dragon King's attacks. The attacks continued. The storm did not subside. The Dragon King fought to the last drop of his life force. Lord Sigil, the First Order, was given orders to immediately begin an attack on the Demon Lord inside the barrier. The war was entering its decisive phase. It seemed to them that the Demon Lord had no more passages left. The barrier was thinning, and only a handful of minions remained around him. Everything pointed to his imminent death. The participants in the offensive confidently advanced, believing that the enemy was already doomed. They perceived his resistance as a last, desperate attempt to hold the position, unaware of the hidden plan hidden behind the veil of dying darkness. Inside the barrier were the elite of the Second Order. These fighters did not retreat in the face of danger and remained completely cool. Distributed along the perimeter, they held their positions and held back the onslaught of demons. Their presence ensured the stability of the defense, and even in the heart of enemy magic, they acted precisely and harmoniously, like a single mechanism. Outside the barrier, warriors of the Royal Guard and 3 knights of the Fifth Order appeared. Their armor glittered in the light of magic, and their steps were heavy and confident. Their arrival signaled a new phase of the battle. They wasted no time in preparing to break through. Their task was clear: to break the barrier's defenses and provide support to those already inside. The new breed of demons created in the darkness could not stand against the elite. The warriors of the Second Order tore them apart with cold-blooded precision, giving them no chance to resist. At the same time, the Third Order held back the onslaught of the Dragon King. The ice storm weakened, his attacks began to slow. The pressure on the barrier increased, and the forces of light began to tilt the outcome of the battle in their favor. People expected that they would only encounter another camp of demons ahead. Hidden behind the veil of the barrier, the shadows of the enemy were silent, and this is what made people tense. They were expecting more than just a fight. Inside the barrier, the soldiers raced forward, trying to destroy the new demons with blistered flesh as quickly as possible. These creatures were unstable in form and aggressive in behavior, but the fighters did not stop. They acted quickly, not allowing the monsters to gather into organized groups. Every delay could result in losses, so determination became their main weapon. They destroyed everything that came their way, sparing no creature. The battle was fast-paced, blades and magic ripping through the demon's flesh, leaving only charred remains. Every step forward was achieved at the cost of a fierce fight. The soldiers did not stop. Their task was clear: to clear the way and not give the enemy time to recover. The Demon Lord hovered in the upper airspace above the battlefield, next to the destroyed ship. His silhouette was dark against the light, piercing the sky with an ominous presence. The people quickly coordinated. The mages began to concentrate spells to bring him down from above. Magical energy thickened in the air. An attack was being prepared, capable of pulling the enemy to the ground and destroying his advantage. They launched an aerial attack, directing all their magical potential at the Demon Lord. Spells flashed across the sky, lightning flashed, and tornadoes of magic shot up, cutting through the darkness. The goal was clear: to knock the enemy down from above and deprive him of his maneuverability. The air trembled with tension, and the sky became the arena for a new stage of the battle, where the fate of the battle was decided. Chaos magic, a twisted force capable of destroying space, soared into the sky. It was followed by a poisonous dragon strike, spreading out as a green storm that ate away all life. Among the people, there was also a chaos sword, an ancient weapon famed in battles where dozens of dragons were defeated. These forces united in a single impulse to fall upon the Demon Lord with overwhelming force. The Demon Lord, as if foreseeing everything, waited for them to approach. He did not take a single step back. On the contrary, he met them right in the air. As the people approached, the space around him exploded with fiery flashes. The air was filled with heat and shockwaves. The flames grew in rings, tearing apart the sky. The battle entered a new phase, where every moment threatened death. Everyone unleashed fiery attacks on the barrier, hoping to break through the Demon Lord's defense. Flames roared as they wrapped around the dome, burning everything around them. However, it soon became clear that the barrier was double. The first layer absorbed the bulk of the blows, while the second, hidden on the outside, merely faltered under the onslaught. The final powerful attack still managed to hit it, and the outer shell cracked, opening the way for further penetration. The people immediately noticed that their attack had produced results. The outer layer of the barrier had cracked, the flames had left deep marks on it. This was a sign to act. Without wasting time, they continued their attack, increasing the pressure. The mages raised new spells, the fighters prepared artifacts, and wave after wave crashed down on the enemy's defense. Now they knew the barrier could fall. Another blow from Chaos was delivered with fury and precision. The Sword of Chaos flared with a dark light, cutting through the air and leaving a jagged trail of energy behind it. The blow landed precisely on the damaged part of the barrier, and the magical shell trembled under the onslaught of force. The fabric of protective magic went in waves, and cracks began to spread quickly. The barrier was approaching destruction. This attack was enough. The Sword of Chaos, piercing the weakened area, completed the destruction. With a roar and a flash of light, the barrier cracked across its entire surface and collapsed, scattering sparks in the air. A wave of magical debris passed across the battlefield, opening the way to the Demon Lord. Now there were no barriers left. The enemy was completely exposed to the onslaught of the forces of light. And then something unexpected happened. As the second barrier crumbled, the air trembled, and in its place a new, even denser shell appeared. Within was a third barrier, a deep-rooted defense woven from dark magic. Its outline was barely discernible, as if it were merging with space. What had been thought to be the final barrier was only part of a more complex defense. The people noticed how a new barrier was beginning to form from the cracked fragments of the previous one. The fragments did not disappear. They began to spin in the air, intertwining into dense threads of darkness enveloping the space around the Demon Lord. All this happened before the eyes of the fighters, and now it became clear to them. Each destroyed layer was not the end, but only a transition to the next. The barrier was alive, changing, and still retained its power. It turned out that the new barrier had been created by the Demon Lord himself with a special purpose. He had erected it to keep everyone outside from interfering. This shield became a barrier between the outside world and the battle within, where the Demon Lord intended to face the First Order. He wanted to finish the fight without outside interference, one-on-one, to the end. He wanted the First Order to fall by his own hand. For him, this was not just a battle, but an act of dominance. He had deliberately cut off outside help, creating a barrier so that he could personally destroy those who dared to challenge him. The Demon Lord sought a direct confrontation, brutal and inescapable, in which he alone would be the arbiter of their fate. Outside, the remaining humans were in disarray. Their attempt to break through had turned into a trap. A new barrier had suddenly appeared, cutting off the path to their allies. It had happened too quickly for them to react. The Demon Lord's move had been unexpected and merciless, and now the warriors outside were forced to watch, unable to intervene, as if they themselves had become prisoners of someone else's will. Thus began a new, furious battle between the humans and the Demon Lord. Trapped within the final barrier, the First Order fighters pressed their ranks, meeting the enemy face to face. The space was filled with the ringing of metal and the flashes of magic. The Demon Lord rained down his power upon them without mercy, and each blow became a test. It was a battle where there was no way to retreat, only forward to the last. The humans understood that, as long as the barrier existed, they were cut off from support and trapped with the Demon Lord. Without hesitation, they began to focus their attacks, directing all their power to destroying it. Mages wove destructive spells. Fighters activated ancient artifacts. Each of them sought to break through the barrier as quickly as possible, knowing that hesitation could cost the lives of the entire First Order. While the Demon Lord was concentrating on maintaining the outer barriers, the people on the ground began to fire heavily. They seized the moment, thinking that he might have a weakness in close combat. With every arrow, spell, and explosion, they tried to knock him down from above and force him to fight on the ground. They thought that by taking away his advantage in the air, they would have a chance to turn the tide of the battle. The most astonishing thing was that the new black demons, who seemed like wild creatures, were able to communicate with the Demon Lord. They understood his orders and acted with frightening coordination. This time, he gave them a direct order to surround the fighter who looked like the captain and attack him from 4 sides. However, the key order was different: to take him alive. This meant that the Demon Lord needed him for a special reason. Immediately, the dark demons, without wasting a second, rushed to attack the deputy captain. Their movements were fast and precise, as if they knew his weak points in advance. From different sides, they tightened the ring, trying not to kill, but to immobilize. The Demon Lord watched from above, confident that his order would be carried out. The battle became increasingly intense. One of the black demons, known among the soldiers as a Shadow Fang for their speed and lethality, pierced the deputy captain's leg with a needle-sharp claw. The blow was precise, upsetting his balance and forcing the warrior to drop to one knee. The other Shadow Fangs immediately surrounded him in a tight ring, compressing the space. Their silent agreement with the Demon Lord's will could be felt in each coordinated attack. The team of soldiers reacted immediately. Seeing Allaire wounded and surrounded by Shadow Fangs, they closed ranks around him in unison, covering him from all sides. Shields rose, spells flew into the air, a wall of steel and magic stood between the enemies and their commander. Their goal was clear: to prevent the demons from getting closer and to keep the second-in-command alive at all costs. Even under the hail of flaming spikes that released Shadow Fangs, the soldiers did not retreat. Each of them stood to the death, shielding Allaire with their bodies, repelling attacks with magic and steel. Despite fatigue and pain, they fought with fury, knowing that the life of their commander depended on their fortitude. Even in the chaos, they did not allow a single enemy to break through the ring of protection. The soldiers, still fighting back, handed Allaire a vial of healing potion. One of the fighters helped him up, while another covered his back. The second in command quickly drank the thick, bitter liquid, and a warm wave passed through his body. The blood stopped, the pain receded, the wound began to heal. Time was of the essence, and every moment of hesitation could cost a life. But they acted as one. Seeing how quickly the lieutenant colonel's deputy's wound healed, the Demon Lord froze for a moment. His gaze lingered on the fighter, who was already rising from the ground without any noticeable pain, clutching his weapon in his hand. The healing had happened almost instantly, so much so that even the Demon Lord himself, accustomed to darkness and destruction, had not expected such a thing. This meant that humans had resources to be reckoned with. The humans struggled to clear a path, fighting the Shadow Fangs that surrounded the barrier. They mercilessly cut down the new demons, forcing their way through the clouds of black magic and sharp claws. Every step was a struggle, but their determination did not fade. Freed from the encirclement, they rushed towards the Demon Lord as a group, trying to get closer and strike before he could restore his defense. Now, everything was heading towards the final confrontation. The Demon Lord was preparing to meet Colonel Allaire's deputy face to face. Allaire was already standing in front of him, healed, focused, and full of determination. Even the 4 defeats of the Abyss, which were symbols of destruction, did not seem as dangerous to the Demon Lord as this man. For the first time, he felt that before him was not just a soldier, but a force capable of shaking even his power. The Demon Lord and Allaire met in the center of the ruined field, surrounded by a whirlwind of magic, ash, and debris. Their gazes locked, each blazing with determination and fury. Without another word, both charged forward. The Demon Lord unleashed a darkness saturated with ancient magic, and Allaire responded with a blow that set the air ablaze. The battle grew more intense with each passing second, as 2 worlds collided at a single point. The bubbly black demons, having received the order, rushed to attack, moving swiftly and inexorably. Their task was clear: to destroy the remaining humans and conduct a strange, dark experiment on them, the intent of which only the Demon Lord knew. But the humans did not flinch. They met the enemy with flashes of magic, the roar of weapons, and thunderous blows of spells. Each fought back with desperation and determination, not allowing the demons to advance a single step. Against the black demons, the humans had many advantages. Their battle ranks were well prepared, and the knights wielded powerful magic, tempered in dozens of battles. Light spells, lightning blasts, and elemental shields easily broke through the ranks of the Shadow Fangs. The demons, although fast and numerous, could not withstand such power. The humans maintained their advantage, pushing the darkness back step by step. And then the Demon Lord, as if he had waited for the right moment, rose into the air. His silhouette eclipsed the sky, and clouds of dark energy began to thicken around him. It seemed that he was really about to carry out his decisive attack. The earth trembled, the air froze, and magic condensed into one point. Everything indicated that a blow was about to strike that could change the course of the entire battle. A bolt of lightning shot across the battlefield, cutting through the air with a loud crack. It wasn't just fast, it was devastating. A bolt of brilliant energy, fired by one of the knights, shot straight towards the Demon Lord. The impact was so powerful that the sky lit up with light, and the earth shook from the force of the splash. The magic struck home, and for a moment, the Demon Lord's silhouette was hidden behind the flashes of the explosion. This attack was not just powerful, it was a compound magic, a rare and deadly combination of flame and explosion attributes. It was this that Deputy Allaire kept as his last trump card. The fire wave, saturated with the energy of destruction, not only burned but also split the space around. The blow covered the Demon Lord with such force that even the barrier trembled for a moment, scattering into flashes of light and ash. The blow hit its mark. A flash engulfed the Demon Lord's body. The air exploded with heat and pressure. It was as if the darkness itself had taken a step back. However, when the ashes cleared, the Demon Lord's figure remained standing in the same place. His robe was barely touched. His gaze was cold and calm. To him, this crushing blow was nothing but dust. The magic that seemed fatal could not penetrate his defense. The abyssal spawn, an ancient ritual, was completed the moment the attack hit its target. The Demon Lord's magic power, which was fed from the deep source, had time to fully unfold. His body and spirit were strengthened, and now nothing but the highest order magic could penetrate his defense. That was why Allaire's crushing blow, so strong and precise, was useless against the Demon Lord's completed transformation. It was unexpected and almost impossible, even for those who knew the Demon Lord's strength. But now it was clear. His magical energy had reached its peak. The darkness around him thickened with a frightening density. The air trembled with tension. Everything pointed to one thing. The Demon Lord had no intention of holding back any longer. The time for the game had passed. The time had come to put an end to this fight. The Demon Lord, without wasting a moment, waved his hand, and another mage, shrouded in shadow, appeared next to him. New magic condensed in their union, and new demons began to burst forth from the cracks in the earth, shadows, swirling clots, each one born for battle. Their numbers grew. Whole hordes filled the field, strengthening the army of darkness in a matter of seconds. The demons grew in number as if the earth itself was spitting them out endlessly. Wave after wave of them covered the battlefield, filling every inch of space. The humans, confident in their superiority, had not expected such a scale. They had thought that the Demon Lord's strength was running out. But now it was clear. They had underestimated him. This battle was far from over, and the darkness was only just beginning to reveal its depths. The Demon Lord still floated in the sky, seemingly unaffected by gravity. Demons circled around him like black comets, blocking him from any sight or blow. A thick curtain of bodies and magic served as a shield that could not be pierced by a sword. It seemed that he had become untouchable, locked in his own dark celestial throne, from where he could watch the battle while remaining out of reach of human attacks. Slowly, the harsh reality began to dawn on the people. They realized that they were facing an enemy that they could not touch with sword or magic. Not only was he out of reach, but he was also controlling the battlefield with impeccable cruelty. The thought that the Demon Lord could destroy them all became more than just a fear. It became a tangible threat, hanging in the air like a death sentence. The newly created demons, whose numbers exceeded expectations, were given a clear and merciless order. From the very core of the heavenly darkness, the Demon Lord commanded, "Destroy the deputy." Their eyes flashed with an ominous light, and the entire mass of creatures, as if with a single mind, fell down. Their goal was clear, without mercy or delay, to eliminate the one who dared to challenge their master. The team and part-time soldiers instantly closed a ring around the deputy, becoming a living shield against the onslaught. They fought with desperate determination, parrying blows covering him with their bodies. But the demons advanced like a wall, tireless. One by one, the defenders fell under their claws. Sparks of magic and ruptures of flesh. There were too many of them. A wave of darkness broke through the defense, and it became impossible to hold back the onslaught. The bodies of his fallen comrades lay around the deputy, each one of them having died defending him with their last breath. The air was thick with smoke, blood, and the sound of shattered magic. The demons were closing in, and now he stood alone. Horror gripped his heart, and his mind froze in confusion. It had all happened too fast. His entourage had vanished, and now he was face to face with certain doom. Another onslaught of demons caught up with Deputy Allaire himself. A dull sound of impact was heard through the roar of battle, and his body shook. He stumbled, clutching at the air, and then scarlet blood gushed from his mouth. It was a sign. He had been hit after all. The demons had not spared him either, and now, after the death of his fighters, It was his turn to face the pain that he had previously only watched around him. The demons did not retreat. They surrounded the deputy from all sides, like a pack of predators finishing off wounded prey. Their claws and shadows flashed in the air, tearing everything that came to hand. But despite all this, he was still standing. Exhausted, covered in blood, barely able to stand on his feet, he was alive. His breathing was ragged, his gaze was clouded, but the fire in his eyes had not yet died out. Gathering his remaining strength, Deputy Leia raised a trembling hand. His body was wounded, his face was distorted with pain, but his will was not broken. Through hoarse breathing, he whispered the last words of the spell. Light flared around him. A final flash of lightning charge cut through the air. Stubborn to the end, he released everything that was left in his exhausted body and directed a powerful blow towards the thickening darkness. Behind him, a snow-capped mountain loomed, a silent sentinel that had stood over the battlefield for centuries. And it was at this mountain, as it turned out, that his final blow had been aimed. A bolt of lightning crashed into the mountainside with a roar, crushing it in an instant. The rock shattered, shrouded in clouds of smoke and ash. The entire battlefield was covered in a shroud, and even the demons were momentarily at a loss in the chaos. A pall of dust and smoke covered the battlefield, obscuring the outlines and blurring the distinctions between enemy and allies. In this chaos, it was difficult to understand what exactly was happening. Everything was mixed up in the rumble and hum. However, one thing was becoming clear. The barrier, once shining with unwavering strength, was now shaking, as if under the onslaught of something greater. Its outlines began to fade, and its defensive power weakened. The magic directed at the snowy mountain awakened something dangerous within it. Suddenly, a roar was heard, and the entire slope exploded, as if torn apart from within. At first glance, this might have seemed like political or magical sabotage, but most likely, the destructive power of the spell instantly evaporated the underground waters that had accumulated in the frozen rocks. The resulting pressure became unbearable, and the mountain could not withstand it, crumbling into boulders and snow. The once impenetrable barrier that held back any physical attack from within finally cracked under the onslaught and collapsed. With the disappearance of the magical dome, the skies above the battlefield opened up, and snowflakes slowly began to fall into the circle where the battle was taking place. There were people already standing on the other side of the collapsed barrier. They were waiting for this moment, ready to attack. Their eyes were fixed forward, where the vanished protection had revealed the Demon Lord. The wind blew their cloaks, and the snow settled on their shoulders, but no one moved. All that was left was to step forward and engage in the decisive battle. The new arrivals froze, horrified. Before their eyes lay the bodies of their men, fallen within the barrier. Their deaths were merciless, as if a whirlwind of blue flame had passed over them. The snow was stained scarlet, and anger grew in his chest, not only for the fallen, but also for the merciless way the enemy had treated his unit. The horrified knights firmly and clearly said that the Demon Lord would pay for everything. For every loss, for every drop of blood, for every cry lost in the snowstorm. Now there will be no mercy. Sigil, the commander of the First Order, his heart couldn't take what he saw. The Overlord had killed all his people like pigs. All he wanted right now was a retaliatory strike. Revenge for his people. All he wanted right now was a retaliatory strike. Revenge for his people. After all, so many lives taken should not have simply died for nothing. The Fifth Order soldiers and the First Order commander stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces stern, their weapons ready for battle, filled with determination and a thirst for justice. They prepared to strike back. There was no longer fear, only a clear purpose. They would not allow the enemy to escape unpunished. The fight had to begin. The deputy lay among the rubble and ashes, his body battered, but with a calm smile on his face. He saw the allied army approaching, the magic of the humans flaring in the sky once more. And despite the pain, he was glad his sacrifice had not been in vain. The Demon Lord would face retribution. The Demon Lord, surrounded by the ashes of his own creations and the magical heat of his recent attack, froze in midair. His barriers were thinning, his strength was waning. What he thought was absolute control was beginning to crumble. Attacks from all sides, resistance from the humans, and the sacrifice of his deputy had put him in a position where he could neither retreat nor attack. He was at a dead end for the first time in his life. The Dragon King was no longer a threat. His magical energy had been drained, his body was covered in cracks, and even his flames no longer burned brightly. He collapsed to the ground, sprawled amidst the remains of the ruined battlefield. The people no longer paid attention to him, as all their fury was now directed at the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord could not engage in close combat. The humans were superior to him in this. Their blows were precise, their magic was destructive, and their unity broke the demon's line. Even the abyssal spawn could not withstand the pressure. Realizing that the situation was hopeless, the demons began to retreat. This was the first time that the army of darkness fled from the humans. The Demon Lord, realizing the inevitability of defeat, gathered the last of his magical energy and attempted instant teleportation. The air around him distorted. A dull hum was heard. The space trembled. However, the instability of the barrier, which was being destroyed from the outside, prevented him from completing the spell. The point of transference wavered, sparked, and he found himself trapped between the rifts of reality. The Demon Lord, trapped in the vortex of distorted space, realized that retreat was still possible if he acted wisely. He focused his will, recreated a barrier, not for defense but as a temporary stabilization zone. He needed a little time to perfect the spell. He could not give up. Still thinking of escape routes, he strengthened the magical structure and looked for a loophole in the destroyed space. The barrier, barely completed, crumbled to dust under the impact of the combined magic. A wave of power swept away everything around, and at that moment a muffled voice, as if carrying a curse, was heard from behind the Demon Lord. It was calm, but inexorable. He would not get out of here alive. The space around groaned, and it became clear. For him, this was the last fight. The barrier crumbled under a single blow from the man, like ice under a hammer. The Demon Lord, overcome with fear, tried to teleport away, but at that moment he was overcome by a strange sensation, as if space itself had rejected his escape. He realized that something had gone wrong. The magic did not obey, the air around him trembled, and the world seemed to close in on him. The teleportation didn't work for no reason. The blade of the First Order commander was special. Tempered in ancient elemental forges, it bore the attributes of space and time. Any attempt by the Demon Lord to break the distance would mean instant destruction. The sword unerringly cut off the curved space, tearing apart the target as it moved. The Lord understood. Any escape now is tantamount to death. The attribute of space and time contained in the commander's sword was a rare phenomenon. It allowed not only to distort distances, but also to interfere with the very structure of magical flows, disrupting the sequence of spells. The Demon Lord did not know the nature of this weapon, but he felt that something in it prevented the completion of the teleport. His magic did not depend directly on the spatial attribute, but still did not work, and this was frightening. As the First Order commander raised his sword, preparing to deliver a crushing blow, sparks of space swirled in the air. But at the last split second, the Demon Lord, overcoming resistance and twisting streams of energy, still managed to teleport. The vortex carried him away from the battlefield, and the next moment he was already in another place, a dark, twisting labyrinth where the air was thick with ancient magic. This was unexpected. The Demon Lord's transfer was not based on space-time magic. He used an ancient, forgotten method of distorting matter based on the inner core of his power. This method could not be suppressed by ordinary means, as an attribute of space. That was why even the commander's sword, which had power over time and space, could not stop the escape. And yet, the First Order commander found him, appeared suddenly, as if he knew the way into the labyrinth in advance. It seemed unfair, but the Demon Lord had no choice. He was pressed against the wall. The thought was spinning in his head. Did he have time to observe this? To assess the situation? Or was every moment now a chance for survival, and only running could save him? There was a roar from behind him as a triple dragon strike came down suddenly, splitting the air and lighting up the labyrinth with flashes of fire, cold, and lightning. The Demon Lord didn't even have time to turn around before the force of the strike enveloped his back, knocking him off balance. The labyrinth shook and cracked from the power of three elements unleashed at once. The Demon Lord sensed the approaching threat at the last moment and managed to erect a protective barrier. It was not as massive as the previous ones, but a compressed sphere of magical energy that enveloped only his body. Despite its modest size, The barrier was strong enough to soften the blow of 3 elements, preventing the wave of destruction from tearing it apart on the spot. Fire blasts and magic shots rained down non-stop, raining down on the Demon Lord's location. Flaming flashes tore through the air, illuminating the battlefield with a blood-red light. The ground shook under the onslaught of the continuous attack, but even through the barrage, one could see how the silhouette within the barrier continued to hold on despite the pressure. The fighting did not stop for a moment. Following the fire blasts, a wind attribute blast was used. A powerful gust of magic swept across the field, lifting debris and knocking down the remaining demons. The air was filled with a whirlwind of ash and smoke, but in the center of the chaos, the Demon Lord still stood, covered by a fading protective barrier. The encounter turned into a real hell. Lights and explosions roared around, blinding flashes tore through the darkness. Columns of fire blazed, whirlwinds of magic swirled in the air, hiding everything around in clouds of smoke and ash. The landscape disappeared under an impenetrable curtain of chaos. Neither the ground nor the horizon was visible. Only the roar of battle and the flickering of battle flashes reminded us of that terrible reality. The men were tireless and had no intention of retreating. Their determination grew stronger with each passing second, and the tension reached its limit. The air was filled with the feeling of an approaching finale. It was time to end this madness once and for all. Every breath, every step brought them closer to the final battle, where the outcome would be decided forever. The Dragon King, though wounded and exhausted, was still standing. His body was covered in scars and cracks, but his eyes were blazing with an unyielding fire. Despite his grave condition, he was not going to give up. He continued to fight, as if he knew that his role in the battle was not yet over. The moment came when the Dragon King's strength was exhausted. His powerful body, wounded and exhausted, fell from the sky to the ground with a resounding thud. The look that had recently inspired fear faded, and his breathing became intermittent. His fall became a symbolic one, the end of the era of the Fire Lord, and a new turn in the fate of the battle. The Demon Lord, aware of the growing threat, watched his opponents with disdain. His voice, cold and commanding, pierced the air like a warning. The humans had relaxed too much, and they would pay a high price for it. He was sure that now would come the moment when they would regret their carelessness and face the true power of darkness. His moment had come. The Demon Lord concentrated all his strength and drew the abyssal sword. The blade sparkled with dark energy, and in an instant he struck a powerful blow. His attack swept through space like a dark storm, leaving behind a trail of destruction and fear. At that moment, it seemed that the outcome of the battle might change forever. The Demon Lord poured all his remaining strength and fury into this strike. Every movement was filled with boundless power, as if the darkness itself had been embodied in his blade. This was a last desperate effort, the outcome of which could determine the fate of the battle. His body trembled with tension, and his eyes burned with a blazing fire, giving everything that was left. A single blow from the Demon Lord swept away everything around him, like a storm sweeping across a battlefield. Its power surpassed anything seen before, and the destruction was vast and merciless. The ground opened up, the air was filled with roars and flames, and the impact left only ruins in its wake. It was a blow that would forever be remembered as terrifying and devastating. The remaining airships were the next target, to be destroyed to deprive the enemy of support and mobility. They hung in the sky like giants, threatening from the air, but now it was time for the humans to crush these pillars of darkness. Every shot and explosion brought victory closer, destroying the enemy's last foothold. The huge explosion caused by the Demon Lord's strike shot up into the sky, blinding with bright flames and deafening with thunder. The blast wave swept away everything in its path. Airships, fortifications, and the enemy state itself were destroyed. The remnants were scattered by the wind, and the battlefield was plunged into an oppressive silence after the furious storm of destruction. The men who watched the destruction of the 19 ships were shocked by the scale and force of the blow. Their eyes widened in horror and amazement. No one expected such destructive power. There was a feeling of sudden anxiety in the air, and the realization that the battle had now entered a new, more dangerous phase. The whirlwind of battle spared no one. People fell one after another, their bodies littering the field, intertwined with debris and traces of magic. Explosions thundered around. Soldiers screamed, and chaos engulfed the entire space. No one could escape their fate. Death seemed to be everywhere, and every battle was a fight for life until the last breath. One by one, the vice commanders fell from the sky, knocked down by the wrecked ships and the furious attacks of the dragons. They fell like debris, engulfed in the fire and chaos of battle. Each fell to a cruel fate, and even seasoned warriors could not escape this turbulent element of destruction that engulfed everything around them. The leader of the Fifth Order worked tirelessly to support the surviving soldiers. He coordinated rescue efforts, guided the wounded to safety, and raised the morale of the survivors. Despite the chaos and destruction around him, he remained a pillar of strength for his men, trying to preserve a sliver of hope in the battle-torn void. Despite all efforts, the losses were enormous. People continued to fall from the destroyed Zeppelin, one after another, like an endless stream. Their fall seemed endless, reflecting all the cruelty and mercilessness of the battle, in which survival was a rare stroke of luck. The next order was to immediately head to the site of the destroyed ship. All forces were gathering together, trying to stop further losses and take control of this key point. Time was of the essence, and every step was important to save the rest and continue the fight. The three commanders decided to use a wind curtain, a powerful spell that could hide the movement of troops and confuse the enemy. The air currents swirled into a whirlwind, raising dust and debris, creating an invisible barrier between the fighters and the enemy. This gave the men a valuable advantage for further actions on the battlefield. The blow was accompanied by an unprecedented gust of wind and a furious storm that swirled around, knocking soldiers off their feet and disorienting them. Even experienced warriors did not immediately understand what was happening. The elements seemed to be a living, unpredictable force, disrupting the usual course of battle and forcing everyone to fight not only with the enemy, but also with nature itself. The wind, though fierce, played into the soldiers' hands as it rose into the sky. Its powerful gusts softened their fall, as if an invisible hand were catching them at the last moment. Thanks to this, they were able to land without fatal injuries, and even in the chaos of battle, they had a chance to continue fighting. Thus, with the support of the wind, all the soldiers landed safely on the ground, without serious injuries. Despite the chaos and dangers, they managed to maintain their health and strength to continue the battle and carry out their assigned tasks. This moment became a salvation for Mr. Julius, who rendered great assistance to the soldiers, earning their sincere gratitude. However, the calmness turned out to be deceptive. Soon something unexpected happened, which again turned the course of events towards danger and uncertainty. One of the soldiers stood motionless, as if caught in the silence amidst the chaos. Suddenly, something invisible touched him, and he suddenly felt a sharp pain or cold. The reason for this touch no one could yet explain. A moment of uncertainty froze, and a feeling of anxiety hovered around. Something hidden began to manifest on the battlefield. As the soldier stood there in a daze, his heart suddenly stopped beating. Death had struck him with lightning speed and without warning. It was unexpected and terrifying. No one immediately understood the reason, but everyone suspected that this was another insidious move by the Demon Lord. The darkness once again proved its deadly power, leaving behind only emptiness and fear. Chelias felt confused and at a loss. He had seen the soldier die before his eyes, but he had no idea where exactly the Demon Lord was hiding. The darkness remained impenetrable, and the enemy was invisible. This feeling of helplessness only increased the tension and forced him to look for new ways to solve the mystery. A majestic crystal palace suddenly appeared before Chelias, a fortress of demon fruits, sparkling with a mysterious light and surrounded by an atmosphere of ancient magic. At the entrance to the palace stood the demon fruit itself, a mysterious and formidable creature, like the embodiment of darkness itself, ready to meet anyone who dared to approach. Although much remained unclear, the magical observation device detected abnormal energy fluctuations around the crystal palace. The magical power pulsed with unusual intensity, indicating the presence of powerful and dangerous forces within, harbingers of an impending threat. Master Lior was informed that the temperature around him was rapidly falling. The air was growing colder, as if nature itself was reacting to what was happening. Powerful magic of a large scale was activated in the area of the mountain peak, but no one knew the exact details yet. A mysterious tension was gathering. foreshadowing events that could change the course of the battle. Master Lior did not intervene in the battle, preferring to remain an observer to assess what was happening. Meanwhile, the 19th ship, huge and powerful, had already suffered serious damage. The damage was so great that it was becoming critical for their forces, threatening the balance of the battle. The order came for those who could rush to the aid of the Third Order to retreat. Lord Sigil, although unable to leave the battlefield, was to gather as many survivors as possible to conserve his strength. At the same time, the Fifth Order was ordered to retreat immediately to minimize losses and prepare for the next stage of the fight. The survivors of the First Order were given strict orders to retreat immediately. The message spread throughout the Order: be on guard, watch the demons' movements closely, and retreat quickly to preserve their lives and strength for future battles. Everyone understood that what mattered now was not courage, but survival. The soldiers advanced through the bitter cold. The scorching wind blew snow into their faces, making it difficult to see and breathe. Despite the harsh conditions, they continued to retreat, trying to maintain order and discipline. Every step was difficult, but the need to retreat outweighed fatigue and cold, because the main thing was to save lives for the future fight. The cold grew stronger with each passing minute. Their breath instantly turned into icy steam, and the snow under their feet creaked as if complaining. The temperature dropped so rapidly that it became clear that they could not retreat any further. The commanders anxiously gave the order to turn off all auxiliary lighting and direct magical reserves to create heat shields. Now their only salvation was magic, maintaining heat in the deadly icy darkness. The First Order commander stood in the freezing cold, motionless, as if turned to stone. His shoulders shook not from the cold, but from anger and despair. He had lost too much: his second in command, his team, his honor in battle. He had failed to summon the dragon, failed to complete his duty. The order to retreat felt like a betrayal of the fallen. His eyes darkened, and for the first time in a long time, he considered ending it all. The air was freezing cold, and without her warmth magic, Yulia would have frozen to death. Henry said they needed to hurry. She knew that, but still asked Angela if she was okay. She replied that she was fine, but the knights they rescued were not doing so well. The situation was very difficult even for them. Leon ordered to activate the core to maximum and continue the retreat. But when he was told that not everyone had arrived yet, he replied that these were unforeseen circumstances, and at the very least, they should bring some information. They were able to confirm the appearance of the Demon Lord using a detector. Leon then looked at the guy who was the Demon Lord. Finally, they started to retreat, Hoshi thought. He immediately went down to Crystal and asked if he was okay. But he clearly wasn't okay, as he used life energy instead of magic. The crystal said it wouldn't just die. He couldn't handle it with dragon sinew. He was mortally wounded, but it wasn't Hoshi's fault. He was just weak and careless. The crystal will be resurrected anyway, so he asked Hoshi to take his remains and use them. Hoshi immediately agreed to do it. That shouldn't be a problem. The stars have aligned this time for the Demon Lord, allowing dragons and spirits to return to their star state. And now Hoshi is in charge here. The dragon finally fell down with the other bodies. Then Hoshi absorbed him, using void magic. He was about to carry out the will of the king of the ice dragons, Crystal. The abyss is made of dark matter, which can be used to create or destroy. He began analyzing the Dragon King's body, but wondered if he could succeed. It definitely won't be released anytime soon, so he moved to the dungeon. Inside, everything was almost exactly as he imagined, and it seems everything will work underground. There was a magical core here, the dungeon is underground, and everything else is the Crystal Palace. The Crystal Palace of the Demon Lord towers above the mountain peak, meaning the entire mountain is the dungeon. The entrance leading to the dungeon is at the base. It's the most effective way to stop the advancing hordes. He's already quite good, but Hoshi planned to improve him over time. The battle was tough, but there were no issues with the infantry. But their commanders are quite a pain. In any case, he hoped they wouldn't return soon. Leon was told they needed to take revenge because only the flagship and 20 ships managed to retreat. But he couldn't afford to act on emotions. He had never heard of the Demon Lord's secret art that allows altering landscapes and creating labyrinths. It's as if he either planned everything from the start or just got lucky. The ruler himself did not have great combat skills. Their defeat was primarily due to mysterious demons with unknown abilities. He slammed the table. wishing he had at least one sample. Leon wanted to hear the opinions of the Order leaders, so he asked to contact them. Commanders of the Fifth Order, along with Commander Sigil and Commander Reyna from the 20th ship, arrived at the strategic meeting room. Sigil apologized for his messy appearance, but Leon didn't mind, because it was an urgent meeting. Reyna mentioned that the blood belonged to the soldiers of the First Order. They couldn't have expected this. As for the Demon Lord, they needed information from everyone who fought him, so he asked Reyna to describe the Demon Lord from a magical and technical perspective. She replied that the Lord initially fought poorly, but his skills suddenly improved in the middle of the battle. His magical abilities are strong, Julia added, as special barriers blocked her magic. Allaire reported that the Demon Lord is immune to magic damage, suggesting that he might have the ability to dispel magic. Leon asked Sigil what demons are like, since he's the only one who has fought them directly. He said that at first they were weak, even too weak, and could be killed with a single light blow. But after they killed about a dozen, the demons suddenly changed, becoming as hard as steel, and started growing spikes as sharp as spears. The Demon Lord can create terrifying monsters and even block Reyna's magic. He resembles the legendary Demon Lord from long ago. Leona was asked not to joke like that when talking about the dead prince from the fairy tales. Julia then remembered that there was something else he mentioned right before the fight. He said he wanted to ask something, possibly as part of his clever information gathering. She asked if he was ultimately a brilliant Demon Lord, but Leon didn't know. The Demon Lord definitely said he wouldn't harm them if they didn't attack him. Julius was agreed with, and it was hard to believe. If this is true, then the Demon Lord holds a grudge and will attack without warning. Leon thought for a moment and said they would need to revise their plans. They must thoroughly prepare to defeat the Demon Lord. If the enemy is a Demon Lord, then this time, if they develop countermeasures against his demons, everything will work out. He was determined to take revenge for that defeat, which cost the lives of over 4,000 soldiers, and next time would be the last for him. It's been 3 whole months since then, and someone was really complaining about the annoying crystals, but he was told to keep mapping. The royal family is offering an incredible sum for this task, an amount no one could earn in a lifetime. All this is happening because the army is fleeing from the Demon Lord, and thanks to him, they have a chance to make a lot of money. Yet, no demon had appeared on their path, which was unusual for the labyrinth. In any case, it's good for them. Fewer problems. One of the researchers heard that they can easily handle a knight, and he doesn't want to fight them in such a dimly lit place. The passage splits again. Everything was planned down to the smallest detail. If they're not careful, it's easy to get lost. They admitted that the Demon Lord who did this is truly clever. When the Demon Lord was named Astral after the starry sky, one of them thought it was an exaggeration and didn't consider it a big issue. However, now they need to be extremely cautious. Hoshi watched all of this, and when he heard himself called Starry Sky, he didn't expect that the name given to him in this world would mean the same as the one his mother had given him. The fortress city of Lindell, whose main industry is the harvesting of medicinal herbs, saw Hoshi decide to abandon the name Miyako Hoshi and become Hoshi Astral when he was named after the Demon Lord Astral. He never thought he would be given such a name, and it would need to be pronounced correctly. A little further on, he saw the magical core. They protect the city using a magic core to create a zone where attributes don't work, but with his control ability, he can easily destroy this core. Thanks to the magical connection with his magical core, he can clearly hear conversations in the labyrinth. Researchers debated whether the Demon Lord truly existed, as it was documented in a 200-year-old record. Finally, Hoshi found the library and went inside, where he was greeted by the librarian. When she saw him, she immediately sensed something was off. Even though he didn't look like a thief, Hoshi still seemed suspicious. When Hoshi opened the book, he was surprised to find that the binding was perfect, as if it came from a printing house, and the ink was of the highest quality. Even more surprisingly, he knows the local language. In any case, all he needs right now is a world map, a history book, a book on magical technologies, and books about the current situation in this and neighboring countries. When he left the library, he realized he had bought too many books. He was in Lindell for the first time, not just to gather information, but also to spend a lot of money. Lindell is a rich and peaceful place where the main industry is the production of medicinal herbs. The reason for such a tranquil town existing in a land where monsters roam is quite simple. This happens in areas where the attributes created by the magical core do not apply. When Hoshi arrived at the right place, crows flew to him. He noted how much he had grown and asked if it was possible to attack the city. The raven replied affirmatively. They will have to fly a lot for a while, gathering information. The birds, called abyss due to their unusual coloring, should not stand out. That's when he decided to take action. In the capital of Margrif, someone was eager to join the fight. There was a king who wanted to slay the demon lord with his sword, even though he was advised against it, as they had already lost about 5,000 knights to him. The demon lord's castle is a very cold place, where even warming orbs don't help. The only way there is through the Great Labyrinth from the lower peak. They sent surveyors to map the Great Labyrinth. The king wanted to go there and conquer it himself, but he was told it was impossible because he was the only one they couldn't replace. The king asked if he doubted him. The man replied that he wouldn't dare. He just couldn't allow the king into such a dangerous place. Even though he is a king, he still cannot defeat the demon lord, so the king turned to the Minister of Internal Affairs, Michael Brandon. He asked if he didn't trust the king's abilities. Mihaly replied that wasn't the case, and at least requested to wait until the labyrinth map was completed. This book turned out to be nothing as well, Leon thought. It was already night. The maid asked him if he was ready to go to bed, but he refused. Since then, he has been living this way. He was removed from his position as head of the staff and placed under house arrest for 6 months, a routine that doesn't suit him. The girl said to stop blaming himself because Lady Julius would surely exonerate him. She insisted that the demon lord's barriers were perfect, so Leon was not at fault. However, the public, especially the families of the deceased, will likely blame him. The lower nobility, who are not very influential now, are taking advantage of this opportunity. But no one could have predicted that a demon lord would appear there, so Leon shouldn't worry about the nobles. He needs to take care of himself. In the end, he admitted that the demon lord was quite unusual. No book mentioned the dungeon he unexpectedly created. First of all, it's strange that there were 2 demon lords existing at the same time. The world won't be destroyed by a single demon lord, but Leon had a bad feeling. The maid told him not to worry about it, assuring him everything would be fine. He agreed with her, considering the strength of their country, and saw no reason for them to be afraid. The castle's dining room is closed at this hour. The maid offered to make him something, but he declined, and he decided to just go to sleep. He had a nightmare where he was on that icy mountain, and the demon lord was laughing hysterically. There were many bodies of his soldiers around. He also saw Aylar, who was wounded and kneeling. Aylar started muttering the name of the commander, Leon, and blamed him for his death. At that moment, Leon woke up. He was in a cold sweat and breathing heavily when his maid arrived. At that very moment, Hoshi also sighed heavily. His eyes were tired from reading in the dim light, and he thought it might be worth destroying this country. He was very tired. Physically, he was fine, but mentally, he was exhausted. Books on philosophy, history, and mythology, subjects he struggled with in his previous world, were not the issue. What troubled him was that this country was full of unpleasant things. That's why it deserves to be destroyed. The land of dragons, knights, and healers, the chivalrous kingdom of Argyll, maintains its military strength through dragon knights and has been thriving for a long time. Thanks to the proximity to the sacred mountain, valuable wild plants grow abundantly near the rivers flowing from the mountain. The development of pharmacology led to the discovery of anesthetic drugs, making surgical operations possible. The cold climate hinders the spread of microbes, and the average lifespan of the population was very high due to urban planning that prioritized cleanliness. The external enemy was a dragon defeated by knights 800 years after the country's founding. Now the 28th generation of the royal family continues to rule this powerful nation. Naturally, neighboring countries constantly aimed to capture them. Initially, the battles were fierce, involving only those who created them. 200 years after the kingdom was founded, 600 years ago, a turning point occurred. A demon lord appeared near the kingdom, creating monsters called dragoons. These creatures, with their incredible power, caused massive damage to the entire country. A dragoon is a type of demon that is inherently strong but unable to grow. They attacked in packs, and no one could resist them. It was hard to cut through dragon scales with weapons meant for humans. The kingdom was losing battle after battle, and the country was gradually shrinking. Then the hero appeared. This man, later hailed as a hero, was a kind-hearted soldier without notable combat achievements. He found a wounded dragoon who had fallen out with his comrades and healed him using herbs. Later, the dragoon opened his heart to the man, United as one, they showed their valor and became pioneers, discovering new ways of combat. The man did not kill the defeated dragon, but made it his companion. Thus, the hero who chose a dragoon as his friend called himself a knight, and, along with his companions, defeated the demon lord who created the dragoons. It sounded like complete nonsense because demons would never follow a human. It's brainwashing through illusion magic. They would never challenge the demon lord, their creator, the ultimate being. Fortunately, Hoshi has a mental link with his abyss, so even if one of his minions falls under mind control, it's just one among many, and that shouldn't work. The hero used brainwashing. He was one of those who disrupted the life energy system through brainwashing. So they got the wyverns the same way. The reason he knows so little about them is that they fly in the sky, making them hard to study. Hoshi is surprised that they even brainwashed real dragons. The Kingdom of Argyll Knights possesses 5 swords designed to slay dragons, the most powerful type of weapon. They use these swords to eliminate most dragon species. Among them were not only low-ranking dragons, but even dragon kings. The knightly Kingdom of Argyll is a dragon-slaying, heretical state that defies nature itself. Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him. A boy was chasing a bird. This bird flew right into Hoshi. The boy immediately apologized for Ark hurting him, which seems to be the bird's name. He was the boy's familiar, and also a dear friend. A familiar is a pet demon. It's not about capturing demons and brainwashing them, but about managing their magical core to create your own personal demon. Hoshi said everything was fine. He wasn't so weak that he couldn't withstand a hit from a little bird. Demons coexist with humans, just like in Hoshi's previous world, where people lived alongside carnivorous crocodiles. But the boy said the demons are friends, not pets, so maybe Hoshi should reconsider his perspective. Hoshi asked him the boy's name. It was Luke, and Ark was his ice bird. He then asked for his last name, noticing his apparent wealth, but when Luke didn't immediately respond, Hoshi quickly added that it wasn't necessary to say, as he was simply curious. When he asked if he should address him as Mr. Luke, he immediately declined. Hoshi then asked if he always walked in this park and if he had any friends. The boy replied that his friend is Ark, and they've known each other for 4 whole years, which is quite a long time. Hoshi remembered that he hadn't introduced himself yet, but didn't hide his name. Luke asked what he did for a living. He was just reading something, then put the books in his bag, which means Hoshi earns a lot if he can afford books. Such attentiveness was quite surprising for a 9-year-old child. Using his mental connection, he instructed the Abyss to start looking for ways to earn money. He said he doesn't have a steady job, and sells some black spheres to make a living. Luke recognized these spheres. They were magical pearls. However, he had never seen ones this large before. Selling one could provide a comfortable life for 10 whole years. It is made by grinding a magical stone and is used in the tip of a wizard's wand or staff, though Hoshi himself was unaware of this. This mysterious substance, created by void magic, means he doesn't have to worry about money. Luke was surprised and asked where he got such large pearls. However, Hoshi decided to keep it a secret and asked if Luke was interested specifically in the magical pearl or in magic itself. It turned out that Luke didn't know how to use magic. That's right, Hoshi can see that he doesn't have much magic, and Luke was surprised by his ability. But he needs to work with the pearls somehow, so he knows how to determine the amount of magical power, he explained. In any case, he asked not to tell anyone about this, and as collateral, he will give them to him. But Luke refused because he couldn't accept something so expensive. Then Hoshi offered him a magic stone, which was worth less than the magic pearl, and they made a deal for Luke to keep quiet about everything. After that, Luke went home after saying goodbye to Hoshi. Back home, he examined the magical manis in his room. Suddenly, the maid came in and called him Lucius, as it was time to eat. He petted Ark and said it was just a regular dinner, and nothing would happen to him. As they walked, the maid suggested they hurry, since his father and sister were both home today. She led him to the main dining hall through luxurious staircases and corridors. When she brought him in, the other maids opened the doors to the hall. His father and mother greeted him with clear displeasure because Lucius was late. Next to him sat his sister, Julius, who once again pointed out his lateness. Luke apologized for it again. Father gave permission to start the meal, and Mother happily announced that she had prepared lobster especially for Julius. She rarely comes home, so it's a mother's duty to make her the most delicious meal. Julius was still on duty today. The royal guard is off until tomorrow evening. Besides, she hadn't had a good rest since the battle with the Demon Lord, and she thought everything would be over once she got home. Father was very interested in the Demon Lord, so he started asking questions about him. She replied that he looked like a 16-year-old boy with black hair and dark eyes. His face resembled someone of Eastern descent, while others, like his mother, thought he had horns. Julius laughed, saying she had read too many fairy tales. They missed the Demon Lord, which is why they didn't get the Ice Dragon King's materials. The mother really hoped to receive some dragon-scale accessories, but the best gift for her is her daughter's return home. Lucius was eager to get back to his room. He wondered if Hoshi would come to the park, when suddenly he realized he looked a lot like the description of the Demon Lord. But he quickly dismissed the thought because the Demon Lord Astral couldn't be in the capital. Blackbirds watched all this from the window. Hoshi never imagined it would all come together like this. Luke turned out to be Julius's brother, so just in case, he decided to leave a couple of ravens on guard. He asked the other ravens to gather information about rumors, especially among the nobility, as it was time to learn more about Luke. Several months have passed since then, and every day Luke comes to the same park. This is how Hoshi gradually learned about him and his family. Luke's real name is Lucius Alcalius, and he is the second son of a baronet of the 5th rank. An elite noble usually has an entourage when visiting the park, but when he created Arca, the ice bird, Luke used up most of his magical power, and as a result he was rejected by his family and servants. At home, he has no one to talk to, and he might feel very lonely. Hoshi planned to destroy this country to find salvation. He won't destroy humanity, so a balance had to be found. Hoshi simply wants to address the situation where humanity rules the world and does whatever it pleases. His specific goal is to help the spirits and protect the dragon. Additionally, it's necessary to create dungeons worldwide to restore life energy to the dragon's veins. The only way to achieve this is to destroy the kingdom of Argyll Knights. Once the kingdom is destroyed, everything will change. Enough people will be kept alive to ensure the country's normal existence. And for that, Luke needs to become king. Hoshi handed him something and told him to keep it to himself. It was a knife for his own protection, even though he didn't know how to use it. Hoshi asked him to keep it for Arca's sake. He needed to keep him close when he went to sleep. The evening before, Hoshi came to the bridge and sat beneath it. He started practicing transformation exercises with the abyss and first told it to turn into a sword. First came the crow, then the rat, and finally the bear. The next transformation will be bigger and more complex. Then the abyss began to transform into what Hoshi had requested, and he transformed into a gigantic black dragon. It was so realistic it was frightening, all thanks to the Dragon King's remains. It seems Luke's house is bustling. As the deputy commander of the 5th Order approached his father, they were clearly up to something, so the abyss should come closer. Julius was glad he was finally going to do it. Her father wasn't going to waste money on useless things now that there was a chance to destroy the Burden family. The Burdens are the second highest barons, and have recently been collaborating with a trading company to influence the Knight Training School from behind the scenes. The 5th Order is truly the most powerful. Information reaches them quickly, but the Burdens went too far. At the Knight Training School, they forced their peasants to become knights to elevate their family's status. It seems that the Budrin family underestimates the high nobility. That's why they must disappear. He has already paved the way for other lords and the royal family. Julius still can't match his father in this art. And the second son, Lucius, will be brutally killed by the treacherous Burdens. As a nobleman and father, he condemns the Burden family and will bring them to ruin, while Luke's familiar will pass to her. She is a prodigy with a storm attribute, and with an ice attribute familiar, she will become the strongest. With the power of storm and ice at her disposal, she could become a leader among knights. However, they must not allow the bird the freedom of action it currently has. It will be restrained by this slave collar. His mercenaries will sneak into Luke's room tomorrow. They'll break in and kill him while he's asleep. Hoshi realized that Luca was going to be killed. Tonight, Luke will go to bed with Ark. Hoshi also asked him to gather everything he might need to escape at any moment. He said it was his intuition. Luke began to wonder if his father was planning to kill his own son. Hoshi then asked him what he would choose, his family or Arka, who he would prefer to live with. Of course, he chose life with Ark, and Hoshi apologized for asking such a silly question. That's why he should keep his sword with him, as it will definitely come in handy later. Luke tried to pull the sword from its sheath, but he couldn't do it. That's because he was made that way from the start, the boy asked. What's the point of keeping him around? Hoshi said it's a magic sword and shouldn't be used. Luke started complaining that he should have said it from the beginning. This sword will save his life, so he must not let go of it for even a second. But once the sword moves, he will no longer be able to return to this country. But he didn't care. As long as Ark was with him, there was no place for him in this country. He clearly didn't think like a 9-year-old, so they decided to call it a day. As night approached, Hoshi arrived at a large building. Inside, there were many dragoons. They were all in very small enclosures. As soon as he saw the pendant on the neck, he immediately realized it was magic. Breaking the stone, the dragoon regained his senses. Hoshi knew they had been brainwashed, so he decided to give them a chance to take revenge on humanity. There were already 2 mercenaries in Luke's family home. They found Luke's room and entered slowly and carefully. The client asked them not to kill the familiar, but one of them had already raised a hand. He began to lower the knife and blood splattered everywhere, but it was the blood of one of the mercenaries. He thought it was a counterattack spell. At that moment, Luke woke up, causing the second mercenary to jump on him. When Luke asked for help, the sword began to follow the master's command and do what the boy wanted. The room erupted instantly, leaving Luke stunned. The sword transformed into a giant black dragon. The dragon told him that it was on Hoshi's side. Hearing this, Luke pointed to the bags where he had packed his things. When the black dragon roared, Hoshi heard the signal and gave the command to the dragoons. He let them rampage, tear apart, and kill so that everyone would feel despair. The city began to erupt in several places. The knights finally took action. They realized everything was happening in the aristocratic area, so they hurried to contact their commanders. In the distance, they saw a black dragon and couldn't believe it, as it wasn't supposed to exist. Suddenly, dragoons attacked from behind, and one of the knights had his head bitten off. The knight captain told them not to be afraid and to charge. There's only one enemy. If they surround him, they'll win. But ahead he saw demons, which was very inconvenient for them, yet they still tried to kill them. One of the demons turned into a bear and leaped at the knights. Their captain was killed, and the remaining knights started to flee, but dragoons were already waiting behind them. The knight tried to touch it, but failed and was killed. Over 100 dragoons, a freely transforming abyss. A dragon from the abyss raging in the aristocratic district was all it took for complete chaos. Hoshi, who once defeated knights with a single strike, now needed to find Luke. Luke was still near the black dragon, but one of the assassins was still alive. With his last bit of strength, he lunged at Luke, but the black dragon noticed and immediately pinned the assassin down. Hoshi then told the abyss dragon that it was time for them to leave, so the dragon turned to Luke. Analyzing behavior, high cognitive ability, high emotional resilience. When Luke is with the ice bird, his pulse is steady, and he feels safe with his familiar. The dragon turned and showed him its back. It was a hint that he would need to climb on his back, and Luke was ready to do it for Ark. They decided to move to the second phase, heading towards the Great Barrier while creating a diversion. With these words, the dragon took off. He flew over the city, where people were terrified by the sight. Hoshi snapped his fingers and created steps to climb higher, and watched the city ignite, smoking like never before. He called the dragon to fly closer so he could jump onto it mid-flight. Landing on the dragon, he said they needed to break the Great Barrier and head north. Then he told Luke not to worry because it was him. Hoshi congratulated them both on their successful escape, as he had predicted something would happen. Luke asked if it was necessary to go that far. Then Hoshi realized and said that he wasn't to blame for the confusion, as he had planned and carried it out of his own will, and he saved him purely by chance. Even if they hadn't met, the same thing would have happened. The knights watched as the black dragon headed north toward the Great Barrier, waiting for it to collide with it. Hoshi wondered if they could break through it, so the abyss dragon would try to shatter it with its mighty breath. The soldiers were already there. If they don't break through the barrier, they'll definitely be killed. The dragon took a deep breath and unleashed a stream of fire at the barrier, but it wasn't enough to break it. Then Hoshi decided to simply use his powers to create a hole in the barrier, and they flew away. Flying away from the city, they arrived at a solitary building deep in the forest. Upon entering, Hoshi planned to make himself something to eat, especially since Luke wanted to live with Ark. He was asked if he regretted his decision, and Luke immediately replied that he did not. Then Hoshi decided to share their plan with him, instructing the abyss to guard the area. This incident is meant to show people their place, and just when they start thinking they're stronger, they'll find themselves in his trap. He will attack them without completely destroying them, and then strong fighters will come here. The strong fighters will have to stay here to fend off the dragon next time, and they will likely succeed. By luring them here, he prevents them from returning to him, allowing him to attack without worrying about defense. That's his secret. Now it's time to talk about Hoshi himself, something that has intrigued Luke for a long time. He decided to get straight to the point and said that his true essence is spirit. Humanoid spirits belong only to the highest ranks, and Hoshi is the highest ranked among them. Luke immediately realized that he was the Demon Lord. His name is Miyako Hoshi, being known to people as the Demon Lord Astral. He is the one who killed over 5,000 knights at the White and Silver Peak, making him one of the main threats. Luke was shocked by this fact, but when he was asked why he was reading a book in the park in the royal capital, Hoshi didn't actually think he would get caught. Just so Luke knows, the Hoshi were attacked first, and they killed the king of the ice dragons. Luke apologized for it, but Hoshi asked him not to apologize, as he plans to destroy the kingdom of Argyle Knights. All cities are ready to fall by his hand, except for the royal city of Maragrifa, which might be impregnable due to its immense strength. But he has a plan, specifically a demon he controls. Its name is Abyss. It has mimetic abilities and can take various forms, from a dagger to a knife. Now the Abyss is disguised as gold and silver coins in the city. Because money circulates freely and isn't tightly controlled, the Abyss will soon spread throughout the city. Without a truly strong enemy like the Royal Guard, the city would have easily fallen. Hoshi means he can destroy cities at will. A financial abyss is like a ticking time bomb. He is the master of magic, and it is under his control. The Great Barrier covering the city is not an obstacle for him. He might even manage to destroy the city's magical system. Luke then asked why he shouldn't just do it right now and destroy everyone. But Hoshi said he doesn't intend to kill people. He understood what he meant, as their depiction of the Demon Lord was simply hilarious. A monster with 7 horns and eyes. They, the spiritual beings, are the guardians of nature. A system for managing nature was established long ago with 8 spirit kings. Each of these spirit kings has a unique attribute that helps them protect their domain. In other words, the Demon Lord is also a type of spirit, making him part of the natural order. Their goal is to control nature's magical power, but this inevitably leads to conflict with humanity. To control magic, the Demon Lord creates dungeons, which in turn create demons. These demons attack living beings and steal their magical power. This is why humanity and the Demon Lord are always enemies. So the Demon Lords only kill a specific group of people who have magic, thought Luke, which was quite true. His goal is to restore balance, and to achieve this, he decided that the kingdom of the Knights of Argyll must be destroyed. In the conference room of the Royal Maragriff Castle in the capital, everyone sat tensely around the table. The King of Peroika sat before them. He stood up abruptly and allowed Sigil Hydra, the commander of the First Order, to speak first. He said that about 120 dragoons from the First Order scattered throughout the city due to a malfunctioning or magically altered device. There was no way to stop them, so they had to kill all the dragoons, which caused significant discontent among the residents living near their breeding areas. So far, they haven't found any evidence of sabotage by neighboring countries. On the other hand, they also haven't found concrete proof that this is the work of the Demon Lord. After finishing the report, people sighed in relief that it wasn't the Demon Lord. A young man asked for permission to speak. It was the invited demonologist, Ruthen Heil. The king granted him permission to speak. Heil was a bit nervous and confused as he searched for the right document. Then he mentioned disabling the slavery grimoire used on the dragoon, the connection to its appearance, and a thorough examination of the timing and motives. This all suggests to them that the likely reason for the revival of the dragoons is the Demon Lord. The king understood everything while listening to him, but the others thought it was a waste of time. Peroika said this is a declaration of war on his country, and the enemy is the resurrected Demon Lord. He announced a campaign to capture the Demon Lord and his castle, promising to make him repent. The incident with the dragoons in the capital, along with the appearance of a dragon inside the barrier and its subsequent destruction. Riots in various places, assuming the Demon Lord Astral is responsible for them all. A special governing body will be established, and the decision on its leader will be made later. Anyone who opposes the attack on the Crystal Palace of the Demon Lords will need to raise their hand. No one raised their hand at the table. Seeing no objections, Peroika continued, stating that he would personally be present during the invasion, and they would start by placing the entire Fifth Order under his command. Mikhail said that in their country there are 5 commanders of orders, and they don't necessarily have to take the Fifth Order under His Majesty's command. He wanted to use the First Order as an example, but the trained dragoons went wild. The Order's mobility was reduced as they were sent to guard various locations, leaving no time for an attack, not to mention the Second Order, which specializes in internal security. He also wants the Third and Fourth Orders to focus on national defense, with the Third Order assigned to assist the First Order using their magical abilities. The Fourth Order will guard the borders with the help of wyverns. As far as they know, news of the barrier's destruction has reached other countries, which means only the Fifth Order is left for the attack. Of course, they won't set off right away. First, they'll thoroughly explore the mountain peaks, and only then will they engage in battle. That's why they sent cartographers there. Mikhail said that studying the dungeon will take decades. Then Peroika said they would turn to forces from another world, as their skills could be relied upon. A year has passed since the failed mission on Raymond, and the sand in the hourglass is already running out. Hoshi said he doesn't hate humanity. He wants to destroy the kingdom of Argyll Knights, which is the heart of humanity. Then Luke asked why he saved him, since he wouldn't be able to help with the Hoshi case. He helped and saved him because he liked Luke, and because Luke and Ark were good friends. It was a compelling reason. He wants to succeed in his plan, even though it will take a lot of time. First, he must save Ark's life. The point is that Ark is in danger, but with him, Luke can make a full agreement like the one they had before. Luke asked how this relates to Ark's life. Hoshi asked him if he knew what a spirit contract was, and the boy did know. When a spirit and a person make a pact, their magical power combines, allowing them to summon stronger magic. This method activates more powerful magic. But Ark is a demon, not a spirit, which is a misunderstanding, since demons are also a type of spirit. In some ways, they are slightly different from regular spirits, but mostly they are the same type of spirits. Demons are spirits of magic. The contract is simple. All he needs to do is give Hoshi permission, and everything is set. Ark has too much magic for the ice bird, and he is too dangerous. But if he signs the contract and becomes a familiar, there won't be any problems. Honestly, they are in a pretty bad situation right now because there's a risk of magic overload. That's why he offers Luke a contract. This will bring his magic levels to an acceptable range and stop being a problem for him. Additionally, it will lift the restriction, allowing him to regain his ice attribute magic. Since it was all for Ark, Luke eagerly agreed, and the contract was confirmed. At that moment, something started happening to both of them. It was quite a powerful force, so Hoshi used a barrier. He installed it for security, and everything around was magic that had been dormant inside the Ark, now enveloping the entire room. The icy egg began to crack, and Hoshi and Luke watched. It exploded, filling the room with a thick, cold mist. Then, out of the mist, a bird appeared. It was Ark. Hoshi himself wouldn't call it an ice bird, as that's a whole different level. The evolved crystal bird is a completely new type of demon, a death demon that rules over ice and cold, possibly an ice phoenix. Luke happily congratulated Arka on the evolution. It seems that Ark's magic power level is stable, and he's successfully evolved, while Luke's magic power has been restored. They did a great job. These two are like rising stars. Hoshi turned to them, congratulated them on their evolution, and suggested that Luke use magic. Luke managed to use his ice magic, so starting tomorrow, he will begin training. Once there are results, they will go on a mission. Luke and Ark were excited about it, and agreed. Heil entered the king's office in the royal palace. At the table were Peroika and Mikhail, and they invited him to sit down. The king mentioned that Heil had excellently argued the Demon Lord's involvement in the matter at their last meeting, and he appreciated his insight. Mikhail said that His Majesty wants information about the Demon Lord's castle. He heard that the size of the Demon Lord's castle is simply unimaginable. Heil said that Astral's abilities are far more impressive than the dungeons of the past. It's estimated that mapping it will take decades, but some believe it would be easier to analyze the labyrinth with the help of otherworldly beings. In Linden, there's an organization under their management called the Guild of Freedom. If they commission them, they can increase the efficiency of their research 1,000-fold. Every field has its genius, and these, for example, create innovative magical tools. Mikhail was shocked by the speed, and the king asked Khail if he would be the cartographer's assistant. When he agreed, Peroika ordered Mikhail to set out with Khail immediately. The labyrinth must be destroyed as soon as possible. They need to immediately put an end to the Demon Lord's reign. Reducing his power by even a quarter would honor their fallen knights. Several months have passed since someone breached the barrier in Lindell, the fortified city open to outsiders. It was Hoshi, Ark, and Luke who hadn't been here for a long time. This time, they managed to enter unnoticed. Now he needs to find a place to stay. It was already midnight. That's why Hoshi didn't mind sleeping outside somewhere, especially since it was summer. They landed on the ground. Hoshi didn't mind Ark's disguise, but Luke might stand out because of his aristocratic background. They arrived at the local inn and rented a room, which Hoshi paid for with abyss coins. Luke went to bed after entering the room, as they are leaving tomorrow morning. The next day, in the hotel dining room, Ark, Luke, and Hoshi were sitting along with many other knights. While they were having breakfast, someone suddenly asked who created this ridiculous dungeon. They told him it was the Astral, but how could he have made it so complex? Luke watched Hoshi's reaction as he suddenly stood up abruptly, but he didn't want to attack the person. He just said it was time for them to leave. Actually, Hoshi was a bit annoyed, but he doesn't have time for this nonsense. The only way to lure them into the dungeon is to help them make a map. To do this, he must join the Guild of Freedom. As a warrior and geographer, he will be able to create a map and make all those who underestimate the Demon Lord regret it. A key requirement for deploying the army is completing the dungeon map. Once the army enters, the dungeon will change, which is why the Guild of Freedom is needed. The Guild of Freedom is an organization with branches in every country that has ratified international law, a massive corporation that extends beyond its home country's borders. A leading organization for people with exceptional talents in any field ensures that orders from the knightly kingdom of Argyle are fulfilled quickly. Among them, there's one particularly interesting large-scale project, exploring the labyrinth of the Demon Lord Astral. He was offered a ticket, which was very modern. Outlanders are literally people from another world, like the man who once became a hero in the kingdom of Argyle Knights. The receptionist asked number 15 to come to window number 2. She greeted them and asked how she could help. When Hoshi requested a registration for 2, he was given a form to fill out. After filling it out, she will ask them a few questions before registration. She explained that Hoshi is a fencer with the rare ability to sense magic, and that he is from another world. And Luke is his student, but he is from this world, and those were all the questions. Then the girl assigned them to the units they could belong to. Hoshi belongs to the division of warriors and supernatural forces, while Luke, being an ice magic user, belongs to both warriors and mages. Hoshi asked to be registered in 2 divisions, while Luca only wanted to join the warriors. Once she registers them, she will issue them a guild membership card. When she finished, she gave them a ticket and said it could be used as an ID, so they shouldn't lose it. Now that they are both guild members in the warrior division, they will have to fight in a training match to determine their rank, which will take place at 4 p.m. There's also a truth or lie test in the afterlife department that's always available. In other words, they need to pass a test to become a full member of the guild, so Hoshi went to take it. Upon arriving at the Department of the Supernatural, he was greeted by several people. Max, the examiner, approached him and asked to be addressed without any titles. Hugging him, he suddenly asked in English if Hoshi understood him. When Max realized Hoshi understood him, he asked what his native language was. Hoshi replied in English that his native language is Japanese. Max was surprised and told the others that Hoshi was straight from Japan, and the girl was pleasantly surprised too. She walked up to him, took his hand, placed it on her waist, and greeted Hoshi.
The charming blonde approached Hoshi, expressing her desire to make him her companion for the evening. This offer greatly surprised the Demon Lord. Randy stopped the attempt of a blonde named Amelia by lightly hitting her on the head and hinting that it is not worth discussing such topics with shy people. In response, Melia explained that Yuta told her about the Japanese fetish for revealing clothing. Max scratched his head and admitted that he had not known about Hoshi's earthly origin. The Demon Lord, in turn, looked at Randy and Melia in surprise, saying that he too had no idea that they were not from Earth. Randy clarified that inhabitants of other worlds may not only be from Earth. Hoshi asked Max where he came from. He replied that he was from America. Max continued to tell about himself, noting that he was from Texas, was a cowboy, and could ride a horse. Hoshi was amazed, and his reaction seemed unusual to Max. Hoshi apologized for his surprise. Max understood, since Yuta had reacted similarly. The Demon Lord inquired about Yuta. Max explained that Yuta was a charming guy from his country who was a rank 7. Hoshi's next question about the meaning of rank puzzled Max even more. Max explained that rank is an indicator of strength. The higher the rank, the greater the power. He added that with each increase in rank, the number of people who have reached it decreases. Max also noted that their company was rank 5, while the Knight Commander and the Royal Guard Knight were beings with a rank higher than 10. Hoshi then asked about the ranks of the demons and the Dragon King. After thinking about it, Max replied that despite individual differences, the Dragon King could be assigned rank 11, and the Demon Lord rank 3. Hoshi was literally stunned. Such a low rank for a Demon Lord shocked him. Max snapped him out of it by mentioning the upcoming guild exams. The Demon Lord thanked Max. Randy and Melia wished him luck and asked him to inform them of the results immediately. The boy realized that he had made Luke wait and hurried towards him. Hoshi saw Luke calmly leafing through a book. Luke was happy to see him. The Lord thanked the boy for waiting and warned him about the upcoming exams. Luke confidently declared that he could handle it. Hoshi also emphasized that it was not worth standing out with too high results, as it could seriously harm. Luke responded that he completely understood the Demon Lord. The boys, with glowing eyes, set off to carry out the planned plan. Entering the examination room, they declared their desire to take the fighter test. The receptionist gave Hoshi and Luke a test to determine their rank within the guild and then invited them to go to training room number 1. In the hall, examiners were waiting for them, a large man and 2 young twin girls. As it turned out, it was not the first time the examiner had seen young people undergoing such a test. The man explained that the test would not be difficult, and the rank would be determined based on the results of the battle with the twins Sarah and Mira, girls of rank 8. The examiner warned that the fight with the girls would be difficult, but they would not cause serious harm. The Death Lord was somewhat puzzled. The older sister, Sarah, was a spearwoman, using magic to manipulate the earth and wood attributes and then finishing off her opponent with her spear. The younger sister, Mira, was a swordswoman, also possessing the earth and wood attributes, but more martial arts oriented than her older sister, using magic only as a supplement. The twin girls, with obvious excitement in their eyes, were eager to begin the fight and quickly determine the rank of their opponent. Demon Lord Hoshi, his gaze focused and penetrating, in turn, wanted to see what Luke was capable of. The fight was decided to begin with Luke and Mira, who were already standing opposite each other. Mira looked calm and confident, while Luke's face was serious. The examiner, his massive figure towering over them, assured the fighters that if they were damaged in any way, he would be able to restore them with his power and asked them not to worry about the consequences. Hoshi silently wished Luke luck. The male examiner, holding something resembling a tablet, stood between the competitors and addressed them, asking if they were ready. Mira immediately confirmed her readiness. Luke's tense expression and slightly open mouth showed that he was likely to make many rash moves. Hoshi, with a noticeable look of concern on his face, insistently asked Luke to calm down. Mira, noticing Hoshi's dialogue with Luke, turned to Luke with a playful smile, asking him to calm down and calling him cutie. The commander, with a serious expression on his face, clearly dictated the rules of the duel. Victory was awarded to the one who could knock the enemy's weapon out of his hands or knock him to the ground. The opponents took their fighting positions. Mira with her sword gracefully extended, Luke with a determined look, clutching the hilt of his weapon. Suddenly, a sharp signal sounded, announcing the beginning of the battle. The fight began quickly. Luke, his eyes ablaze with excitement, was ready to strike the first blow, rushing forward with unexpected speed. The boy suddenly realized that his legs were being rapidly entangled by strong roots that had suddenly emerged from the ground. It was Mira, her face set in concentration as she summoned her earth and wood magic. Luke's eyes suddenly blazed with an ominous light. It became obvious that his own unknown magic was beginning to destroy Mira's bonds with astonishing speed. The roots began to crack and crumble. Mira, whose face had been filled with confidence a second ago, now distorted in utter surprise, not expecting her magic to be stopped so easily. Luke, meanwhile, was already preparing for his next move. Hoshi, who had been watching the fight with undisguised interest, quietly said that Luke had instantly used one of his signature moves at the very beginning of the fight. Sarah, who had been standing nearby and watching the proceedings with an expression of concentration and slight anxiety, immediately asked excitedly what that ability was. Hoshi, his gaze sliding over Luke with barely perceptible thoughtfulness, replied that it was a secret, a unique ability available only to Luke. Sarah frowned, casting a fleeting glance at the boy, full of apprehension. Luke, without wasting a second, did not stop there. He immediately went into the next attack. His movements became even more rapid and assertive. Mira, retreating and dodging Luke's furious attacks, shouted that what was happening was a gross violation of the rules of the duel. In response, the boy, with a determined expression on his face, exclaimed that everything was fair and he was acting strictly according to the rules. Mira, looking surprised and clearly unable to cope, desperately tried to get closer to her opponent, but she was unable to do anything. She could not imagine that she would have to use her rarest and most powerful move. With a decisive gesture, Mira plunged her dagger into the ground, preparing for her next move. After Mira cast the spell, a giant stone creature suddenly appeared in front of the stunned Luke, imposing with its power. Luke was overcome with fear, his face contorted in horror. Hoshi, who was watching this, also felt anxious, realizing that the attack of this huge monster could simply destroy the boy. The monster repeated Mira's every move, like a stone reflection of her. She moved forward, and the monster immediately followed suit, going on the attack. Luke, realizing that he was no match for this colossal creature, tried to hold his ground, using his sword to block the blows as best he could. However, Mira turned out to be quicker and more accurate, disarming the young fighter with one movement, his sword flying to the side. The examiner, with an expression of surprise and recognition on his face, solemnly declared Mira the winner of this intense battle. Luke looked a little desperate as he sat on the floor with his head down, but deep down he knew he couldn't win this fight. Mira, with a gentle smile, extended a hand of friendship to Luke, urging him not to be upset. After all, as she noted, he really did make the rank 8 fighter sweat a lot. The examiner nodded calmly, agreeing with Mira, who predicted Luke would move up to a rank higher than 8 and predicted a brilliant future for him. Luke looked at them all with gratitude, smiling sincerely, expressing his appreciation for their support. Mira seemed completely enchanted by the young fighter, her eyes glowing like hearts, and she really wanted to hug Luke. Hoshi found this a bit strange, but he did not interfere with the scene. Then it was Hoshi and Sera's turn. Sera looked at Hoshi with slight distrust. Luke returned to Ark, hugged him tenderly, and apologized with sincere regret for his defeat in battle. The sudden sight melted Sera's heart, and she, with a slight blush, found Luke incredibly cute. Sera, watching the boy with undisguised interest, felt a strong desire for him to definitely join their team. And Sera immediately came up with a cunning plan. If she could defeat Hoshi, she could take Luke as her student. This plan seemed absolutely brilliant to her, and a confident grin played across her face. Sera, with a barely noticeable but definitely evil grin, looked at Hoshi. He only looked back in bewilderment, trying to understand what he could have done to the elder twin. Hoshi, concentrating, began to deeply analyze and compare his strength with the enemy's capabilities, while simultaneously trying to remember the details of his previous battles. Luke shouted words of encouragement to his master Hoshi, charging him with energy. Mira, in turn, supported Sera with no less fury, her hands raised in the air. Hoshi took a stance that seemed completely unprofessional to Sera, an experienced rank 8 master. Sera was convinced that it would be very difficult to defeat her in this duel. The examiner, with a concentrated expression on his face, clearly saw the mood of the opponents and began to pronounce the command of readiness, raising his hand. Sera was extremely serious. Her eyes were full of determination. She was seriously intending to win and take Luke to her team. The command "Start" was given, and the opponents rushed into the attack, their figures merging in dynamic movement. Sera, focusing, immediately launched the earth bullets, which flew towards Hoshi with a roar. The Demon Lord, his gaze calm and insightful, assumed that the first move would be just like this. The Demon Lord, with incredible speed and precision, cut through the earth bullets with a swing of his sword, creating a whirlwind of destroyed projectiles around himself. Sera was almost certain that her attack would hit the enemy, or at least make them dodge, but it didn't, causing a surprised look to appear on her face. The Demon Lord, his eyes glowing with a mysterious light, dealt an incredibly powerful blow to the elder twin that seemed to shake the air. The blow was incredibly powerful, and shock was reflected on Sera's face. She immediately realized that she was facing an incredibly strong opponent. Sera, a skilled level 8 fighter, was stunned and amazed by Hoshi's incredible swordsmanship, her face showing shock after his swift attack. Careful analysis of previous battle data allowed Hoshi to use all of his Knight Commander class opponents' skills in this fight. The intense battles of the past 6 months made their mark in this fight. The Demon Lord quickly began to take the lead in the battle, pushing the elder twin aside with his powerful onslaught. His movements were fast and precise. Sarah, realizing his superiority, decided to quickly retreat to a certain distance, in order to then take the next step in the attack. Hoshi instantly realized that his opponent was about to launch a long-range attack. Sarah, having run some distance, prepared for the next magical attack. She lowered herself, pressing her fingers to the ground to concentrate her power. A fleeting look of joy crossed Sarah's face as her attack seemed to reach Hoshi. But what happened next was completely unexpected. When the long-range strike reached Hoshi, to her amazement, he was able to block it with his sword. Sarah found herself both confused and furious. The Demon Lord was pleased with his move, a barely noticeable smile playing on his face. The older twin realized that in this fight, she would have to use magic, where the created substances could not be dispelled by ordinary magic. Hoshi guessed this too. Hoshi pointed the tip of his weapon at the ground and immediately cast a seal, sealing off the section of floor. Sarah focused all her strength on the next attack, but something went wrong. Nothing happened. Her magic simply didn't activate at that moment, leaving her confused. Hoshi, seeing the confusion of his opponent, directed all his efforts to using all his accumulated experience in close combat, preparing for a decisive attack. Hoshi charged forward, his movements precise and merciless, leaving Sarah with no choice but to desperately defend himself. In the end, the Demon Lord dealt a powerful blow that deprived Sarah of her weapon, sending him flying. The winner of the battle was Hoshi, calmly standing over the defeated Sarah. The spectators were amazed. Luke, his face was shining with joy and delight, while Mira was completely perplexed. The Demon Lord himself was expecting an official assignment of rank to his power. The Demon Lord continued to stand over Sarah, motionless, as if about to take his next action. However, the words about the end of the battle stopped him. The victory over the 8th rank master took the examiner by surprise. His face expressed complete bewilderment. He could not understand how Hoshi was able to defeat Sarah. In the man's opinion, all the boy's actions resembled a beating. The examiner really wanted to see Hoshi's magic, and the unique fighting style the boy used at the end of the fight. The Demon Lord, with a slight smile, helped Sarah up. She, looking at him with gratitude, thanked him. Using the last of her strength, Sarah, with a look of surprise and respect on her face, said that Hoshi was incredibly strong. Sarah, approaching Hoshi with an emotional expression on her face, shouted about where he was and why he hadn't joined them earlier. The Demon Lord didn't know what to say to that. The only thing he could say was that his absence was a secret. Sarah was completely perplexed by this answer. Luke, his face beaming with joy, ran to the master to express his admiration. To Luke's admiration, Hoshi responded with a slight smile that he was simply improving his skills and avenging his student. An anxious thought flashed through the Demon Lord's mind that the number of the Abyss minions was growing, and he should immediately look into the external intelligence data. However, the pleasant conversation between the student and the teacher was interrupted when it was time to announce the results of the battle. Luke's magic, according to the examiner, was amazing, although some of his actions were quite crude. That is why the boy with the shining face was awarded rank 5. Speaking of Hoshi, the examiner praised his outstanding swordsmanship and impeccable defense against magic. He was awarded rank 9. The Demon Lord was not very pleased with this rank. A slight disappointment flashed across his face as he accepted the information from the examiner. This meant that he still had a long way to go to reach the level of Knight Commander. The examiner, holding the papers in his hands, solemnly handed over the test results in written form, explaining that after these documents were handed over to the administrator, the boys' ranks would be officially added to their membership cards. The examiner, smiling slightly, thanked both boys for their excellent work. Hoshi and Luke stood next to each other and thanked the girls for the sparring. Mira was delighted with the fights that had just taken place, while Sarah, with a sad expression on her face, was clearly disappointed with her loss. A month had passed since he had registered with the organization. Hoshi, his gaze more serious and focused, now considered himself a true freedom fighter with an important task, to draw a map of his own great labyrinth, although he had only been there twice before. He went there every day now, dedicating himself to this mission, but the rest of his time was spent studying and maintaining order in the house. There were days when Hoshi and Luke worked separately. During those times, Luke was looked after by his sisters, his attentive mentors. The sisters, whose gazes were full of concern, had been partial to the boy ever since his rank was measured. Under their guidance, Luke's strength steadily increased. Meanwhile, Hoshi was undergoing his training, delving deeper into new knowledge. He was already quite satisfied that he had mastered the basics. He learned that magic academies were actually specialized schools dedicated entirely to the study of mechanical activation techniques of magic. Such academies were several levels above the average wizard school. Hoshi clearly understood that these basics would help him perfectly hide the use of his void magic, and the fact that everyone considered him an outstanding swordsman was only to his advantage. Hoshi appeared with a deeply concentrated gaze. Next to it, the limitless possibilities of the magic circle were proclaimed. This phrase undoubtedly carried a key meaning for understanding the world in which the events unfolded. On the intricacies of the magic system, a new science, magoecology, was introduced, and it was explained that the origin of the magic circle was directly dependent on the owner's magic. An example was given of using the fire attribute to activate ice magic, which emphasized the flexibility of the system. Hoshi showed a willingness to take immediate action or experiment. He decided to start with the gravity control magic circle. He held a book in his hands, repeating the information about the gravity control magic circle. Hoshi was clearly disappointed. His expression showed that he realized his mistake, because it was not gravity control, but only levitation. This kind of magic activation required an incredibly large expenditure of magical energy to maintain it constantly. There was also an error in the magic formula. Hoshi encountered difficulties. He realized that he needed to master the law attribute before the upcoming battle. His opponent was capable of using law attribute magic. Luke and Ark were together. Realizing that the master had arrived, the boy called out to him. Luke greeted Hoshi happily. The boy shared his impressions of his walk with Sarah and the others in the great labyrinth of the Spirit Peaks. Hoshi looked confused, not knowing what to do. Luke asked if he draws the map with his left hand. Luke smiled and informed Hoshi that he had a request for a hike for tomorrow at 9 a.m. Hoshi was somewhat surprised to hear about the hike. Hoshi confirmed his name as he addressed the receptionist, who apparently heard about the request for a hike, so she offered her help and said good morning. The girl turned to Hoshi. She knew that they would receive all the necessary clarifications on the important request personally from the head of the branch, and she pointed to the door, inviting him to come inside. Hoshi-san, without delay, asked the girl where exactly the room they needed was. In response, he heard that it was the second room on the 6th floor, and immediately put a map of the large labyrinth on the table. The girl, her eyes wide with amazement, exclaimed, "Simply magnificent." She added that it would take some time to accurately calculate the reward due to them, and suggested that this issue be resolved tomorrow. Hoshi-san confidently headed towards the elevator, on the display of which the number 6 was clearly lit, indicating the desired floor. Having reached his goal, he briefly thanked and approached the door, preparing to enter. Approaching the door, Hoshi gently pulled on the handle, apologizing as if he was disturbing someone. The door swung open, instantly revealing a small group of people already gathered inside the room. There were 4 people sitting at a table in the room. One of them, with his blonde hair combed back and tied in a ponytail, looked intently and appraising Ly at Hoshi-san, who had just entered. One of the men's eyes radiated a certain satisfaction, as if he was noticing that all the participants were finally together. The man, who introduced himself as Brenda Kroll and announced himself as the head of this branch, invited everyone present to begin an introduction to get to know each other better. Hoshi-san listened attentively, ready to introduce himself. The first to speak was a young man with disheveled hair, who introduced himself as Lucas Wright. He explained in detail his age, his 8th rank, and emphasized his excellent mastery of the bow. With a wide, confident smile, Yuta Ayama, the next in line, began his story. He proudly proclaimed his outstanding skills in fire and explosion magic, and also mentioned his membership in the famous Otherworldly Fighting Club, his 7th overall rank, and his impressive 10th rank in magic. The girl in the hood and mask, calling herself Harky Eli Salamander, said that she was an elf. In order not to attract unnecessary attention, she wore a hood and also made a contract with the Spirit of Flame. Hoshi-san, looking at Harky, remembered that elves were the longest living race among all humanoids. He thought about them, noting their unique characteristics. Hoshi-san muttered apprehensively that elves were something to be wary of, as they were known for their ability to capture and enslave spirits. It was Hoshi-san's turn to introduce himself, and he said his name. He said that he came from another world, was a 9th-ranked person, was skilled with a sword, and most importantly, had the rare skill of detecting magic. The branch manager, Brenda Kroll, explained the reason for their gathering. It was a special order to eliminate the enemy. He specified that 2 of the people present specialized in fire and explosion magic, and Hoshi-san was good at searching and detecting magic. Lucas Wright, after listening carefully, asked a follow-up question, wondering if this meant the target had an ice attribute. Brenda Kroll confirmed his assumption, saying that they needed to start by finding the target. Hoshi-san listened thoughtfully as Brenda Kroll continued her story, recalling that the target had been destroyed by the order last year. However, they had recently discovered something new that required special attention. At that moment, Brenda Kroll announced the main objective of their mission, introducing the fearsome Ice Dragon King. His image appeared in the middle of the snowstorm, emphasizing the enemy's power. Hoshi-san's eyes sparkled with determination and focus. He was prepared for the battle ahead, and his gaze showed complete readiness for action. Brenda Kroll reiterated that their main target is the Ice Dragon King. He emphasized that their organization is primarily interested in the materials that can be obtained from this powerful being. Harky, sitting nearby, clarified that they were required to find and kill the Ice Dragon King, while Brenda Kroll added that their research department had already confirmed his presence last week. Yuta Ayama raised his hand and asked decisively why they had to do this. He also asked if they were even capable of killing the rank 11 Ice Dragon King, expressing doubt in their own abilities. Brenda Kroll answered Yuta's questions, reassuring him that it was not a problem. He explained that the Ice Dragon King had just been reborn and was only about 30 meters in size, so their rank would be enough to win. Brenda Kroll concluded that this was why he was asking them to find and defeat the Dragon King, and then collect valuable materials. His gaze was serious and full of expectations. The branch manager began to assign roles. Hoshi-san would locate the target using his magical sense. In the battle itself, Yuta and Harky would destroy the enemy with their fire magic, and Lucas would use search to roughly locate it. All 4 of them, including Yuta and Harky, expressed their willingness to carry out the order. However, Hoshi-san seemed to curse silently, clearly dissatisfied with some new order that he thought was absolutely incompetent. The main objective of the mission, to find the Ice Dragon King. Branch Chief Brenda Kroll finished the briefing on the upcoming mission with a serious expression on his face. He wished his subordinates good luck. Right after the official part, Hoshi-san seemed to be taken aback by an unexpected question from one of his new acquaintances, who curiously asked if he was Japanese. There was a sense of surprise in the air, as if this question was extremely unusual in their world. Hoshi-san, squinting slightly, confirmed his nationality by answering in the affirmative. The man who introduced himself as Yuta smiled back and, seeking a more informal conversation, suggested that Hoshi-san address him simply by his first name, thus confirming their common origin. Following Yuta, Lucas, another member of the team, also approached Hoshi-san, introducing himself by name. He seemed friendly and open, eager to quickly establish contact with his new comrade in arms. Hucky, in turn, introduced herself briefly and concisely, simply stating her name. She added that their time together would be short, as if sensing that their paths would soon diverge after the current task was completed. Lucas, with a slight smile, suggested that they use the free time before the mission to test which of them had the greater strength. Hoshi-san, narrowing his eyes a little, accepted the challenge, giving permission to call himself simply Hoshi. Haki, having assessed the situation, suggested using a special serving training room for their sparring. Hoshi-san immediately agreed, expressing obvious enthusiasm for the upcoming match. Then Lucas, taking the initiative, announced that he would be the first to spar against Hoshi-san, pointing to the sign that read, "Second Training Room." He extended his arms, inviting Hoshi-san to prepare for the fight. Hoshi-san and Lucas stood opposite each other, each holding their swords, preparing for the duel. Hoshi-san asked if they were ready to begin, and Lucas, taking the role of observer, confirmed that he would be the referee for this training match. Hoshi-san and Lucas' faces were tense, their gazes locked in anticipation, full of determination. Lucas, with a toothy grin, exclaimed, giving the signal for their training match to begin, and Hoshi-san prepared for action. The next moment, Hoshi-san rushed forward like a gust of wind, leaving behind only a cloud of raised dust. He rushed towards Lucas, sword at the ready, demonstrating his speed and readiness for battle. Lucas's face twisted into a grimace of tension and genuine delight as he watched his opponent's lightning-fast movement. He realized with startling clarity how fast Hoshi-san was, barely managing to react to his sudden and swift attack that raised a cloud of dust. Hoshi-san, with grace and skill, assumed a flawless fighting stance, his sword at the ready, anticipating the next decisive move. Lucas, with his mouth wide open and his excitement undisguised, shouted out loudly, challenging Hoshi-san, his voice echoing throughout the training room. Hoshi-san, in turn, felt the heat coming from Lucas, as if he was emitting an internal flame, preparing for his attack. The next moment, a colossal wall of fire, created by Yuta's powerful magic, rose up right in front of Hoshi-san, with a roar and a crack. The flames, raging and furious, filled the entire space, heralding a crushing and all-consuming attack. Hoshi-san, looking at this flaming obstacle, calmly and unperturbedly said that this was indeed a powerful technique. He remained completely cool-headed, despite the threat emanating from the fire element, his gaze focused. Yuta, his face contorted with extreme effort, focused all his will into maintaining a powerful wall of fire, his body shaking from the effort. Meanwhile, Haki watched him with wide eyes, clearly impressed by the incredible power of his magic. Hoshi-san raised his hand with a confident movement and began the process of dispelling magic, aiming to neutralize the raging wall of fire. His figure was surrounded by a whirlwind of collapsing spells, clearly demonstrating his exceptional skill in controlling and suppressing magical energy. Lucas's face showed obvious tension, mixed with slight confusion after the sudden attack, while Hoshi-san, on the other hand, maintained a surprisingly unperturbed expression. He was watching Lucas closely, as if assessing his every reaction to what had happened, and preparing for his next move. Hoshi-san stopped abruptly, his figure frozen in midair, his gaze cold and focused on his opponent. Lucas, still stunned and not fully understanding what had happened, made an unintelligible sound, his face distorted with surprise and some fear. Suddenly, Lucas's hand, which seemed to have been hit by an invisible but powerful blow, jerked back sharply, and his eyes widened in shock and pain. Hoshi-san, without taking his impassive gaze away, continued to watch this reaction, analyzing every movement. Right in front of Lucas, where the blow had landed, a trail of destruction formed, like a torn crater, with small fragments flying in all directions. He cried out in fear, his eyes wide open in horror and shock at what he saw. Yuta, with a wide, almost manic grin on his face, made the decision to attack, loudly announcing the explosion he was about to cause. He assumed that now would be the best time to use long-range attacks, hoping to cause significant damage from a safe distance. Hoshi-san, moving with incredible, almost supernatural speed, barely dodged the fiery blast, leaving behind only a blur in the air. His sword, as if anticipating the next danger, was instantly raised and ready for action. Both Yuta, Lucas, and Haki seemed to be completely shocked and stunned by the sight they were witnessing. All three of them simultaneously let out a cry of surprise, their faces showing complete shock and complete incomprehension of what had just happened before their eyes. Hoshi-san pondered Lucas' abilities, wondering about the connection between his increased physical abilities and the unusually high circulation of magic in his body. He also wondered how much of this phenomenon was related to Lucas's explosion abilities, noting that he had nullification magic that could help. Hoshi-san continued to analyze the situation, delving deeper into Lucas' abilities, which he found increasingly intriguing. He wondered again if his enhanced physical abilities were a direct result of the magic circulating in his body, and how much of that power was due to his powerful explosions. Hoshi-san, looking closely at his opponent, came to the conclusion that he would have to buy time with close combat to activate his next spell after all. He mentally prepared himself for a direct fight while Lucas shouted, warning him to be extremely careful. Hoshi-san and Lucas, both in low stances, looked at each other with tense faces, their gazes full of determination. Hoshi-san showed unwavering concentration, while Lucas, gritting his teeth, prepared for the next move, radiating anticipation of the fight. Lucas, despite the previous blow, was smiling widely, his face expressing sincere admiration for Hoshi-san's skill, whom he praised for his excellent swordsmanship. Hoshi-san only nodded approvingly in response, accepting the compliment. At that moment, Lucas rushed forward. His movements were fast and unpredictable, as if he was trying to confuse his opponent. Hoshi-san, remaining calm, watched him approach, preparing to fight back. Lucas, swinging his sword above his head, triumphantly exclaimed that Hoshi-san couldn't stop him with this attack. Numerous magical spheres appeared around him, emitting light, which added to the impact of his statement. Lucas, with a toothy grin on his face, laughed and asked Hoshi-san if he could handle his new attack, confident in his superiority. Meanwhile, Hoshi-san, without flinching, thought that Yuta would be out of luck this time, hinting at his readiness to handle any threat. Hoshi-san, having made a decision to act, moved quickly towards Lucas, his figure becoming a blur. He flashed in front of Lucas, who only managed to exclaim a curse word before Hoshi-san was already behind him. Hoshi-san unleashed a series of lightning-fast sword strikes with astonishing speed, which swirled around him, creating a vortex. Each swing seemed to disperse the magical spheres that remained from Lucas's previous attack. Lucas, his eyes wide, exclaimed in disbelief, expressing his utter amazement. He was amazed that Hoshi-san was able to extinguish all of his fireballs with one swing of his sword, demonstrating incredible control and strength. Lucas' face was contorted with emotion and tears were clearly visible as he fell to his knees, admitting his defeat in the fight. He looked broken and shocked by the outcome of the fight. A clear and unambiguous voice rang out in the air, loudly proclaiming, "Hoshi is the winner!" This announcement, unaccompanied by any visible figures, clearly summed up the battle that had just taken place, leaving only an echo of triumph. The boys gathered around Hoshi expressed obvious surprise. Haki, Lucas, and Yuta exclaimed in amazement upon learning of their comrade's high rank, to which he merely shrugged. The boys' surprise grew as they demanded to know the nature of the strange technique that they said made magic disappear, calling it a matter of life and death. Hoshi continued to listen, remaining silent. The team prepares diligently for the upcoming test, training and honing their skills, and Hoshi defeats them in one go. The guy tries to explain the principle of the technique that suppresses magic. The goal set for the Seekers must be achieved within 2 months, and for now they have little time. Under the starry sky covered with tiny dots like snow, a mighty dragon moves forward majestically. On its back, leaning on the scaly surface, stands Hoshi in a dark cloak, wondering how far away the Ice Dragon King's location is. The Demon Lord listens attentively to the dragon's answer, which tells him that they have about 30 minutes left to fly. The boy's gaze becomes focused. He takes this information into account. Hoshi reports on his search. He says that he managed to secretly find out the location of the Ice Dragon King. In the snowy expanses, among the swirling snowflakes, a wyvern is visible, carrying a knight on its back. The young man, watching what is happening, thoughtfully wonders why the Fourth Order appeared here. Meanwhile, he learns of the plans of other adventurers who are also looking for the Ice Dragon King. This discovery makes him angry, as the agreements were only made with the Freedom Guild. An armored warrior appeared before Hoshi, riding a wyvern. It seemed like the group was searching for some important information, and it was likely that the Fifth Order was leading this search operation. Hoshi was thinking about starting a search and destroy operation. Hoshi, who was standing on the back of a mighty black dragon, indicated that the first priority was to locate the Ice Dragon King. He assumed that it was worthwhile to keep an eye on him for now, since a representative of the Fifth Order was present at the designated location. Hoshi realized that it was necessary to warn the Dragon King as soon as possible. The black dragon soared majestically over the snowy expanse, awaiting further commands from Hoshi. Hoshi himself was pondering the upcoming battle, planning to use all his strength to destroy his enemies and demonstrate his true power. Among the snowy mountains, a black dragon carried Hoshi. The dragon reported that the Ice Dragon King's line of sight was already close, which made Hoshi surprised. The Demon Lord felt that the Ice Dragon King's magical energy had not yet reached its full strength. In the raging snowstorm, a tense confrontation unfolded. The light and dark dragons were ready to engage in battle. Hoshi and the dragon's gaze met. The Ice Dragon, who introduced himself as Crystal, the Ice Dragon King, listened attentively. The boy introduced himself as Hoshi Astral and the Demon Lord of this generation. Hoshi asked if the Ice King had the same name as his predecessor. The dragon explained that knowledge was passed down through generations, but he himself had no information about the Dragon Kings of the past. Hoshi offered the Ice King his labyrinth in the North Mountain, inviting him to make it his new home. The Ice King expressed his gratitude for the offer. Hoshi urged the Ice King to leave the area immediately, as he could be captured by the humans. The dragon looked surprised, realizing the seriousness of the situation. Hoshi realized that the people had probably found the Ice King because of his activities in mining the dragon vein that flowed from Spirit Peak. It seemed like it was time to pay for it. A powerful dragon could be seen against the mountain range. Hoshi thought that the previous generation of Ice Kings had probably only gone halfway, taking refuge at Spirit Peak. The Ice King, in a defensive position, was forced to flee from the threat of humanity. Although he could regulate the dragon veins from afar, he could not fully control them from a distance. Hoshi, with a look of concern, asked the Ice King if he could temporarily take refuge at Spirit Peak. He warned that there was a squad of knights nearby, and staying there could be deadly, especially with the dragon vein guarded. The Demon Lord convinced the Ice King to hide for now, as he was going to destroy the country soon. After that, it would be much easier for him to control the dragon vein. The Ice King accepted Hoshi's proposed solution, realizing its meaning. Hoshi, with a look of relief on his face, exclaimed that it was wonderful when the Ice King accepted his offer. At the same time, his expression changed slightly, reflecting some doubt or surprise as he considered his next steps. The Ice King was astonished, as he thought that the Demon Lord couldn't possibly be strong enough to destroy the kingdom. He asked Hoshi how he was going to do that, to which Hoshi confidently replied that it was no problem for him. Hoshi confidently stated that the preparations were complete, and if everything went according to his plan, the entire country would be destroyed in one day. He looked straight ahead, with a serious expression on his face. The Ice King, stunned by Hoshi's statement, showed obvious surprise. After a moment of shock, Ice King accepted Hoshi's words, stating that he understood and trusted him. He expressed his faith in the Demon Lord's abilities. Hoshi instructed Abyss to escort Ice King to ensure his safety. Abyss agreed, and Hoshi breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that he no longer had to worry about it. Hoshi declared that only the knights would remain, and he himself would take care of their destruction. With the starry sky shimmering around them, the armored knight prepares for his next move. He plans to first gather information from those pursuing them, and then prepare a surprise attack, and for this he needs 3 more minions of the knight. Against the backdrop of snow-capped mountains, amid swirling snowflakes, Hoshi, riding atop a mighty black dragon, confidently declares that by dawn there will be no trace left of their enemies, foreshadowing a quick and complete victory. The Fourth Order's temporary camp, lit by a flickering fire, is immersed in pre-sleep routine. One of the knights on duty prepares to hand over the watch to his comrade, unaware of the impending threat. The knights exchange brief words, confirming that everything is going according to plan. They discuss the upcoming meeting with the Ice Dragon King, emphasizing the importance of having full confidence in their abilities in the face of such a powerful opponent. A giant creature, powerful and muscular, leans towards an armored knight. The knight inquired about his well-being. The knight, standing before the enormous creature, decides to feed it before resting. The creature seems pleased with this intention, its gaze expressing anticipation. The knight was instantly and brutally eaten by the monster. Hoshi calmly watches Abyss, standing nearby. The Demon Lord notes that Abyss dispatched him in an instant, demonstrating his incredible strength and efficiency. Hoshi is pleased with how silently and stealthily the attack was carried out, praising Abyss for his ability to act stealthily without drawing unnecessary attention to his actions. With a small smile on his face, Hoshi declares to the Abyss his complete freedom. He extends his hand, symbolically removing the last shackles of slavery, granting him freedom. Abyss listens attentively to Hoshi, who explains to him the conditions of his next actions. When the fire in the knight's camp goes out, it will be a signal to Abyss, meaning that he is free to leave if he wishes, and his mission will be complete. Hoshi turns to the Void, asking if the deployment is complete. He waits for confirmation that they are ready for the next stage of their plan, looking carefully towards his ally. Abyss informs Hoshi that he was unable to retrieve the Dragon Slayer from the Fifth Order's Sent One, as the item is in a tool bag that he was unable to access, causing an unexpected setback in their preparations. With a determined expression on his face, Hoshi declares that there is no reason to delay, and it is time to begin executing their plan. He is determined to act immediately. A mighty, muscular dragon, towering over the forest landscape and ruins, lets out a victorious roar, its strength and fury foreshadowing the complete destruction of everything in its path. 2 knights in armor stood, stunned and frightened, looking at the dragon. An explosion of incredible force shakes the earth, completely destroying the enemy camp. This massive destruction, accompanied by a deafening roar, marks the beginning of Hoshi's plan. The chains that bound the mighty dragon were torn apart with devastating force, each fragment flying apart, symbolizing his release and the beginning of his furious attack. Many dragons, one after another, descend from the sky, their silhouettes outlined against the raging storm. Their appearance heralds an attack and complete dominance in the coming battle. In the sky above the snowy valley, under the puzzled gaze of a knight in a helmet, several dragons fly. The knight, realizing what is happening, exclaims in amazement and orders the others to stop, but it seems too late. One of the knights, his face twisted in panic, informs his commander that the operation is complete and he is ready for further orders. It seems their mission to find the Ice Dragon King has taken an unexpected turn. Hoshi raises his hand and creates a powerful barrier that surrounds the knights. One of the knights, wearing a massive helmet and with a look of intense fear on his face, tries to understand what is happening. His gaze is directed somewhere beyond the frame, where, presumably, horrific events are unfolding. Hoshi, with a cold determination in his eyes, explains that the barrier is holding back the enemy. At this time, the knight who was trapped feels that the surroundings have become too dark to see anything, and becomes terrified. Hoshi, sword in hand and cape fluttering behind him, makes a powerful dash forward, as if flying through the air. He quickly attacks his opponents, beginning his part of the battle. While one knight is confused as to why he can't see anything, Hoshi continues his attack, moving at incredible speeds, leaving only blurry trails and flying particles in his wake. Hoshi, with an expression of calm confidence, notes that the Dragon King's fang has proven too sharp. He announces the start of his attack, deciding to start with the pawns before moving on to more serious opponents. One of the knights screams in panic that they do not have the necessary equipment for knight fighting. Hoshi, who is nearby, mercilessly deals with his opponents, leaving behind a splatter of blood and fallen bodies. He recognizes one of the fallen soldiers as a representative of the Fifth Order. Several knights descend from above, calling for their comrades to take him. Meanwhile, Hoshi, whose figure is hidden in the shadows, continues his attack, demonstrating his speed and lethality. The fallen knights lie on the battlefield, surrounded by traces of blood and destruction. Their bodies, marked with the numbers 9, 10, and 11, indicate the number of enemies destroyed. Hoshi, sword in hand, slowly approaches the group of knights who, overcome with terror, order each other to prepare for battle, calling him a bandit. They realize that they are facing a serious threat. Hoshi continues his relentless attack, dispatching the knights. His movements are swift and precise, leaving behind bodies of fallen enemies. The count is 12 and 13. The warriors died one after another. Out of 36, only 13 remained. Hoshi's gaze is directed into the distance, where numerous armored figures can be seen. The companion standing in the shadows suggests turning on the light, believing that there are few enemies, but Hoshi urges him to calm down. A woman in a horned helmet, overcome with rage, calls on her subordinates to stand in the illuminated circle and avoid dark and inconspicuous areas. Her voice is full of indignation. One of the warriors ponders the strength of the enemy's armor, noting that even the Dragon King's fang cannot penetrate it. He suggests that this is the Fifth Order, clad in orichalcum armor. The order is given to move to the third phase of the operation. Someone notices that 3 small groups are surrounding them on all sides, and most of the small fry have probably already become scared and run away. One warrior analyzes the armor and weapons of all the defeated knights, concluding that they are about to face a stronger foe. His comrade only briefly confirms this thought. A sharp sound is heard, and someone says defiantly that he is ready for a fight. The outline of the forest is visible in the background. 3 warriors in armor are discussing something, pointing towards the forest. One of them asks what happened, and the other claims that something moved there. One warrior asks in confusion what could be there, while another insists that something happened. A third warrior says that he sees nothing, and is told to be alert and focused, as the enemy can get them if they do nothing. Marquis, the man in the horned helmet, gave the orders to split up and search for the bandits. She also ordered them to keep their distance and begin moving separately. The commander's gaze expressed complete seriousness. He understood that each team was acting as a decoy, but this was the only way to stop the enemy, and if they were attacked, they would be able to counterattack. A group of armored warriors are moving through the forest, and one of them exclaims in confusion that they have separated from Lord Marquis. He blames himself for the situation. Two warriors argue. One claims that something has indeed been seen, and the other rudely interrupts him, asking what they should do now. A third warrior calls them to stop arguing, fearing that the enemy will discover their location. A group of armored warriors moves, surrounded by indistinct lines and dots, as if through the effect of destruction or sudden movement. A cry of surprise sounds above them. Two armored warriors look into the forest, expressing concern. One of them is sure that there is something there, and the other confirms that the enemy is somewhere nearby. Hoshi, with a slight smirk, notes that he is surprised to be noticed. He describes his opponents as weak and ugly, but admits that they are not completely useless. The Demon Lord muses that he had it all planned out and it was supposed to be a clean kill. However, he didn't give himself away and he should be more careful next time. Hoshi confidently declared that he would destroy his opponents with one swing. Hoshi noted that there were only 5 opponents left. He called for a try of the wood attribute magic circle, then announced the summoning of the Abyss Sword. Hoshi manipulated the tree's roots with a magic circle. He declared that the enemy would be captured and destroyed by the Sword of the Abyss. The warriors panicked and cried out that the trees had grabbed them, and one of them called out to Marquis, asking what to do. The roots were wrapped around them, and traces of swift magic were visible all around. Marquis looks at the huge, dark blade coming down from above in surprise, and asks what kind of giant sword it is. He also realizes that it is the magic of the trees, aimed at grabbing them. Hoshi, with an expression of surprise and triumph, raises his hand, claiming that he seems to have calculated everything correctly. The warrior, wide-eyed, addresses Sir Marquis, pointing to a huge sword that is rapidly falling from above. The whole scene is permeated with a sense of imminent danger. Marquis screams desperately, calling for the people to cut the roots and run. One of the warriors confirms his readiness to carry out the order, waving his weapon. The rooted warriors groan as they realize they cannot move. The roots wrap tightly around their bodies, foreshadowing the inevitable. The giant abyssal sword crashes down, shaking the ground and sending up clouds of dust. Its power is visible in the cracks that spread around as the blade slams into the surface. Hoshi looks at the aftermath of the attack with an unperturbed expression. Dust from the powerful blow swirls around him, and he calmly watches what happened. Marquis looks at Hoshi, recognizing him as the one in the orichalcum armor. He notes that he seems to be the only one who survived, calling him a true royal guard. The commander, with an angry expression, calls Hoshi a bastard and demands to know his name. Hoshi, in turn, calmly replies that he should introduce himself first. Marcus furiously declares that he will not reveal his name after Hoshi has destroyed all of his subordinates. Hoshi, grinning, replies that then he does not need to introduce himself either. Hoshi asked Abyss who it was, and was told that it was Marquis Sverti, the third head of the Fifth Order. It is added that his magical attribute is Curse, and he is more powerful than the commander of the Second Order, well suited for the Dragon Slayer sword. The helmeted warrior admits that Hoshi is more than just an opponent. He asks if the Dragon King's Fang can fight the Dragon Slayer's sword, but is told that it is no match for Hoshi. Hoshi, calmly observing the events, says that they should continue the battle. He adds that it is not a good idea to attack with the Dragon King's Fang. Marquis, with his sword raised, aggressively asks if Hoshi is ready and shouts that he is finished. Hoshi, with a calm and confident expression, looks straight at his opponent. The leader of the order rushes to attack, moving incredibly fast. Hoshi, watching his movement, notes his speed. Marquis attacks fiercely. His sword comes down, but Hoshi dodges it with incredible agility. The blow leaves powerful marks in the air, indicating the speed of the attack. The leader of the order quickly delivers a series of blows, his sword leaving blurry marks behind him. Hoshi dodges each attack, expertly avoiding collision. Hoshi, with an expression of surprise, throws his Dragon Slayer sword to the side, while the helmeted warrior, shocked, asks why he did that. The sword seems to fly far away. An unusual shuriken-like object flies rapidly from above, almost hitting Hoshi. He looks in the direction of the thrown object with slight bewilderment. The helmeted warrior contemptuously calls Hoshi a pathetic coward. Hoshi, in turn, with a mocking smile, replies that he is no better, and notes that such is the Fifth Order. Hoshi, with a serious expression, looks at the helmeted warrior standing in front of him in the open area. Hoshi notes that it is Abyss, Marquis Swarty wonders which hand Hoshi is dominant with, recalling that he swung his sword with his right hand in training. He notes that his right hand is now injured. Hoshi decides to attack primarily from the direction he considers weak, and his companion confirms that he has understood this. The order leader ponders tactics, noting that drawing the bowstring on the Dragonslayer sword is a good idea, but the time it takes for it to return after being thrown is long, meaning that it must be attacked during that time. Marquis rushes forward in fury, shouting that Hoshi is finished. Hoshi stands calmly, sword in hand, ready to fight. The commander charges forward, his sword cutting through the air, his face contorted with determination, his movement so fast that it leaves a blurry trail behind him. Marquis, jumping, pushes off the ground with incredible force, leaving a whirlwind behind him. Hoshi watches his rapid movement. Marquis moves forward quickly, and Hoshi, with slight surprise, notes, "Now!" The leader of the order raises his fist for a powerful blow, his face expressing concentration and determination. Hoshi watches his movement carefully. The swift attack causes a vortex of energy to rise around Hoshi. He is slightly surprised by the sudden movement. Marquis throws a punch, which Hoshi deftly parries, causing sparks to fly around them. The commander, with an expression of surprise, wonders what Hoshi is up to, while Hoshi himself, with a glint in his eye, ponders his next move. Hoshi notes that the opponent's combination of offensive and defensive sword tactics is brilliant. He understands that it will be difficult for him if he loses his sword. Marquis muses that he will need more than that to defeat Hoshi, noting that the bowstring is made of orichalcum, like the armor. Hoshi calmly looks at the helmeted warrior, who calls him a bastard, and admits that he is no simple assassin, as he dodged his attacks twice. Marquis remembers with pain the attack on Mountain Peak, after which Hoshi left him the only survivor. Hoshi, standing in a dark aura with the silhouette of a demonic dragon visible behind it, announces the summoning of Astral Hoshi. Marquis, with his eyes wide open in horror, exclaims, "What? A real demon lord?" looking at Hoshi, who has a terrifying shadow looming behind him. Hoshi, with an expression of calm and determination, addresses the shadow, urging it to tie up the enemy while he counterattacks. Hoshi, with a confident look, declares that he will find an opening and shoot the enemy while he is fighting back. The tense face of the head of the order is visible, his face distorted with rage. In front of him stands the dark figure of Hoshi, shrouded in clouds of smoke or flame, making threatening sounds. The Marquis raises his sword, looking up, a scream on his face. A word is spoken, expressing a command or a call to action. The commander raises his sword to strike and receive Poison Scythe. A powerful explosion or impact occurs, obscuring everything around. Marquis looks into the distance with a stern expression, thinking about the power of his attack, capable of killing even a dragon lord. Another character notes that the blow hit its target. The air is filled with a cursed fog left over from the blow. The effects of prolonged exposure to it include bleeding, dizziness, pain, nausea, and the inability to heal. Through the dissipating fog, the figure of a warrior is visible. The thought is heard that no living creature is capable of defeating him, one might even say. Marquis stood frozen in amazement, his gaze fixed on the faint silhouette of Hoshi standing amidst the dust and destruction. The demon lord seemed to have withstood the blow, which was shocking. The silhouette clears, revealing the dark hooded figure of Hoshi, who, to the warrior's surprise, is still standing firmly on his feet. The thought of such incredible resilience flashes through his mind. Marquis' face contorts in shock and confusion as he sees that his powerful attack has failed to achieve the desired result. He barely comprehends the impossibility of what is happening. Suddenly, Hoshi takes action, generating a dark, swirling energy around himself. This force seems to be ready to counterattack. Hoshi forms a sinister, pulsating ball of dark energy that causes obvious shock to the warrior. Marquis, with a look of horror on his face, realizes the identity of his opponent. Realizing that before him is the very same demon lord who can change the course of the battle. The name Abyss is heard.